Welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of Microsoft 365 Virtual Training Days, where we're talking about Microsoft 365 fundamentals. I'm Brian Baldock, a Senior Program Manager and Fast Track Architect inside the Fast Track for Microsoft 365 team. So today what we're going to be talking about is a session where we're discussing Microsoft 365 security and compliance capabilities. And then finally, we're going to wrap up everything with a nice bow, where we're talking about Microsoft 365 licensing, service, and support. So let's get started on session 4, where we'll learn about security and compliance and identity solutions through Microsoft and how that will help people and organizations secure their entire digital estate and simplify compliance and reduce risk. So let's get started. Let's get started with the session, learn about Microsoft 365 security and compliance capabilities. So what we'll be focusing on in this session is the security, compliance, and identity solutions that Microsoft provides to help people and organizations secure their entire digital estate. And that also helps us simplify compliance and reduce risk. So let's dive in. Our learning objective and our focus point for this session today is going to be Microsoft Entra ID, which is Microsoft's cloud-based identity and access management solution. And that's what helps people connect to their apps, their devices, and data securely. And learn what we'll be focusing on as well is learning about the functions and identity types supported by Microsoft Entra ID. So after completing this objective, you'll be able to describe the core functionality of Microsoft Entra ID, describe the types of identities supported by it, and describe the concept of hybrid identity as supported by Microsoft Entra ID. So what is Microsoft Entra ID? Well, as many of you already know, it was formerly known as Azure Active Directory, and it's Microsoft's cloud-based identity and access management service. So organizations use Microsoft Entra ID to help enable their employees and guests and others to sign in and access resources as they need. It's important to note that Entra provides a single identity system for multi-cloud and on-premise applications. So it's not specifically just the cloud, right? It ties both ways. So it can provide access to internal resources or cloud apps developed by your own organization. It can provide access to on-premise apps on your corporate network or on the intranet. So external services such as Microsoft Office 365, the Azure portal, and any SaaS application as well can be tied to Azure Active Directory. And that actually helps us secure that connectivity and protect it behind conditional access, which we'll touch on in a bit. So we can also synchronize with our existing on-premise Active Directory. So if you have other directory services or you're using Active Directory, then we can tie everything back into Entra ID by syncing the two together. And that lets us have the best of both worlds, essentially. So we can securely enable the use of devices owned by the organization or personal devices such as mobiles or tablets. So mobile devices or tablets. We can also enable collaboration with business partners and customers. So if you're a subscriber to Azure services, Microsoft 365 or Dynamics 365, you automatically have access to Microsoft Entra ID because you need those services. You need that forefront, that gateway, in order to allow access to these additional services on the back end. So users of these services can take advantage of the included Entra ID services to enhance their implementation by upgrading to premium licenses. So by default, you have Entra ID. It's just included with, as a free version. You can use it for anything from a directory standpoint for accessing cloud applications. But when we enhance it with premium licenses, we get additional functionalities, like let's say the Identity Secure Score. Identity Secure Score helps you to objectively measure your identity security posture and plan it according to security improvements that are suggested by Microsoft best practices. And so those are just recommendations that we're making based on your current layout and how each improvement action in that Identity Secure Score is tailored to your specific configuration and how you can improve it and what kind of results you'll get from it. So some of the basic terminology that's called out in the following presentation, in the following session, we're going to be talking about tenants, So a Microsoft Entra ID tenant is an instance of Microsoft Entra ID in which information about a single organization resides. So it's tied to your organization, including organizational objects such as users, groups, devices, application registrations, etc. There's also the concept of a directory. So the terms Microsoft Entra ID directory and Microsoft Entra ID tenant are often used interchangeably, but basically the directory is like a database or a catalog of identities. So that can include users, groups, applications, devices. And a Microsoft Entra ID tenant consists of only one directory. You could have multi-tenant organizations as well. So a multi-tenant concept is an organization might have multiple tenants to include subsidiaries or different business units that operate individually. So organizations that merge or acquire companies might have that geographical boundary or some type of residency regulation or something like that is preventing them from integrating everything into one tenant. So you might have a multi-tenant situation where you're going to have that cross-collaboration established as well. So just to reiterate, we were talking about a tenant, which is Microsoft Entra ID tenant. So that's an instance of the organization. The directory, which is Microsoft Entra ID tenancy, which is kind of used interchangeably, but think of it as a database or a catalog of all the identities and resources in your organization. And multi-tenant, where we've got one organization with more than one Entra ID tenancy. So when you ask the question, what can I assign an identity in Microsoft Entra ID? There are three categories primarily. You can assign identities to people, which are humans essentially. Examples of identities assigned to people are employees of an organization that are typically configured as internal users or external users that include customers, consultants, vendors, or partners. So for our purposes, we'll refer to these users as identities. You can assign identities to physical devices, so mobile devices, desktop computers, IoT devices. And lastly, you can assign identities to software-based objects as well, so as applications, virtual machines, services, and containers. So these identities are often referred to as workload identities. So let's dive into user identities and what that means. So they represent people such as employees or external users. That could be customers, consultants, vendors, and partners. In Microsoft Entra ID, user identities are characterized by how they authenticate and the user type property. So how a user authenticates is asked relative to the host organization's Microsoft Entra ID tenant, and it can be external or internal. So an internal authentication means that the user has an account on the host organization's Microsoft Entra ID and uses that account to authenticate to Microsoft Entra ID. An external authentication means that the user authenticates using an external Microsoft Entra ID account that belongs to another organization, like a social network identity or another external identity provider, and then authenticates to the other Entra ID organization. So the user type property describes the user's relationship to the organization, or more specifically, the host organization's tenancy. So the user can be a guest or a member of the organization's Microsoft Entra ID tenant, but by default, guests of the organization have limited privileges in the organizational directory, and relative, that's relative to members of the organization. So a guest will likely have less rights than an actual member of the organization. So if you think about this as a 2x2 matrix, there are four types of user identities. You've got the internal member. So these users are typically considered employees of your organization. The user authenticates internally via their organization's Microsoft Entra ID, and the user object created in the resource Microsoft Entra ID directory has the user type of member, which enables member level access to the resources. Then you've got the external guest or guests, and that can be consultants, that could be vendors, partners. They typically fall into that category. And the user authenticates using an external Microsoft Entra ID account. So we're not authenticating to our own tenancy. These users are authenticating to their own tenancy. And by the relationship between these two tenants is getting access to ours because we've permissioned their guest level permissions. So an external member in this scenario is common in organizations where we've got multiple tenants. So consider a scenario where Contoso, Microsoft Entra ID tenant, and the Fabricam Microsoft Entra ID tenant are tenants within one large organization. So think of Fabricam as a subsidiary to Contoso or something like that. So users from the Contoso tenant need member level access to Fabricam. And in this scenario, Contoso users are configured in the Fabricam Entra ID tenant such that they can authenticate with their Contoso account, which is external to Fabricam, but have a user type of member, which enables member level access to Fabricam's organizational resources. So again, just to segment just to touch on the difference between the two. We've got our external identity, we've got our internal, and then we've got guest identities. So when we have our external and we're using it as a member level access, it's effectively creating a synced user into that other tenancy. When we talk about internal guest, don't worry about this. It's kind of more of a legacy scenario now, but it's kind of important to understand from a B2B collaboration perspective. When we're talking about B2B collaboration, users can use their own credentials, allowing their external identity provider to manage authentication and their account lifecycle. But we're moving away from this scenario essentially. It's still important to understand though, because it's B2B collaboration is still primarily used at a large level, but what we really want to focus on is that member categorization, right? So external guest, internal member, and external member. Now let's touch on workload identities. So a workload identity is an identity that you assign to a software workload. So this enables the software workload to authenticate to and access other services and resources in Microsoft Entra. So these workload identities are applications, service principals, or managed identities. So a service principal is essentially an identity for an application that delegates its identity access functions to Entra ID. So for the service principals to be able to access resources secured by Entra ID tenant, the application developers must manage and protect the credentials. And if not done correctly, this can introduce security vulnerabilities. So managed identities help offload that responsibility from the developer. So no more hard-coded passwords type thing. And then managed identities are a type of service principal that are automatically managed in Microsoft Entra ID and eliminate the need for developers to manage credentials. And they provide an identity for applications to use when connecting to Azure resources that support Microsoft Entra ID authentication. And that can be used without any additional cost. So the two types of managed identities are system assigned and user assigned. So when we're talking about system assigned, some Azure resources like virtual machines allow you to enable managed identity directly on the resource. So this identity is tied to the life cycle of that Azure resource. And when the resource is deleted, Azure automatically deletes the identity for you. So you don't have to worry about going and cleaning up your service accounts. User assigned is another option, which you may also create a managed identity as a standalone Azure resource. And once you create a user assigned managed identity, you can assign it to one or more instances of an Azure service. With user assigned managed identities, the identity is managed separately from the resource that uses it, which also has its own advantages. Then we've got device identities. And a device identity is a piece of hardware, such as a mobile device, a laptop, a server, or a printer. And these device identities can be set up in different ways in Microsoft Entra ID. So we've got the concept of an Entra ID registered device. We've also got the concept of an Entra ID joined device and a hybrid Entra ID joined device. So in the past, these were Azure AD registered, Azure AD joined, and Azure AD, hybrid Azure AD joined. So going with the new terminology, Entra ID, everything. So provide users with support. So when we're talking about registered devices, what does that mean? So an Entra ID registered device essentially allows a user to bring their own device or mobile device, depending on the scenario, and a user can access the organization's resources using that personal device. So an Entra ID registered device requires that the device is registered to the Entra ID tenant without requiring an additional organizational account to sign into the device. So we're just going to register the device. That means the organization is aware that this device is being used for this purpose, and then we can apply other actions to it. Microsoft Entra ID Joined is a device that is joined to Entra ID through an organizational account, and then this is used to sign in to the device directly. So an Entra ID Joined devices are generally owned by the organization, and this is the step into that sort of cloud approach, cloud-centric approach to organizational device management. It's the right way to do it, to be honest. Now, the hybrid joined device is kind of the best of both worlds scenario, where you have your on-premise Active Directory, your on-premise organizational servers that are joining the device to your Entra ID for you. So it does require the device be domain joined, and those are joined to your on-premise AD. And then your on-premise AD is the one that takes care of the Entra ID joining for you. Let's talk about Microsoft 365 groups. A Microsoft 365 group, which is also often referred to as a distribution group, is used for grouping users according to collaboration needs. So you can give access to members of this group. You can give them access to a shared mailbox, a calendar, files that are part of a SharePoint site, and more, essentially. You're combining everything together for that collaborative purpose. So members of a Microsoft 365 group can only include users. So you can't have nested groups inside of this group. It has to be direct one-to-one user to group. And including users outside of your organization, you're allowed to do that as well. So calling out some key differences between M365 groups and security groups. By default, when a tenancy gets created, any user in that tenancy can create Microsoft 365 groups because they're intended to allow users to collaborate more effectively. So this is the default. You might want to, depending on your governance needs within your organization, take a look at that and do a little bit of research. There are ways to lock that down. However, by default, we want users to be able to collaborate, so that's enabled by default. And keep in mind that because Microsoft 365 groups can be enabled by users, you don't need to be an admin role, whereas security groups do require an admin role in order to apply membership. And so Microsoft 365 groups are really intended for that collaboration approach, and only users are allowed to be added there, whereas security groups allow users and devices. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward. M365 groups, collaboration, users only. Security group, everything else. So let's hop into a demo right now where we're going to explore Microsoft Entra ID user settings, and I'll kick that off right away. So in this demo, what we'll be looking at is accessing Microsoft Entra ID and walking through the various settings for an existing user. So let's dig right in. We'll have to open up a browser window and we'll go to entra.microsoft.com. Again, multiple ways to get to the same location. You can type in the address directly. You can also navigate to that admin center via the admin portal itself. So again, by going to admin and then selecting identity here, and that'll open up another tab with our Entra Admin Center. Multiple ways to get to the same location as always. Now, after we've signed in, so again, my session had already been opened. I'd already logged in with this user, so I didn't have to sign in. So you might have to sign in again. If that's the case, enter in your admin username and your password. And next, when you're logged in, on the left-hand side here, we can see a bunch of different options. So right now, identity was expanded, but typically these are the options that are available inside the Entra admin portal. So we've got identity protection, identity governance, verifiable credentials, permissions management, and global secure access. So where we're going to want to focus is under the identity portion of the Entra Admin Center, and we're going to want to dive into our user settings because that's where we're going to be focusing for this demo. So let's go into our users, and from our users, we'll go and select Adele. So now I can see additional information about Adele. Notice that on the left-hand navigation panel, overview is automatically selected. So we can see some information about the information of the user, such as their profile picture, their name, their email address, things like that, user principal name. What we can also see is, whether or not they show any sign-in data, when their previous sign-in was, if there's any B2B collaboration settings that are needed, things like that. So we can look at some additional information around the user. So what we're going to want to do is check out what roles Adele has assigned to her. So let's go on the left-hand side here. We can see that from the top down, we've got our overview, we've got our audit logs, sign-in logs, diagnose, solve problems if there are any, custom security attributes, and assigned roles. So assigned roles is the one that we want to focus on right now, because let's see if she has any administrative roles assigned to her. And she does not at the moment. So let's go and add one, because we need Adele to be an administrator for a specific thing. So let's go to the Add Assignments button up at the top here. And we can see that there is a bunch of different admin roles that are available to the user or to the administrator to assign a user. So if we want them to be an administrator for a very specific thing, then we can start selecting different admin roles and combining them and mix matching them if we need to. However, in this case, I'm not going to apply one directly to Adele. Ideally, we want to assign roles in a way that has a time limit and does not necessarily effectively assign the role permanently to the user. It's more from a different aspect that we're going to approach this from a principle of least privilege. So it's possible that she would need an assigned role permanently. And if that's the case, then we would apply the role directly to the user account. But keep in mind, principle of least privilege, always assign the role for just the amount of work that she needs to be able to do. So next up, let's look at the groups. So looking on the left-hand side here, we can see that there's also the group option. So let's select groups, and we can see that she is a member of multiple groups. From this view here, we're able to add and remove memberships to a group. So if I wanted to add her to a new group, I could click here and add to a specific group as I select, or I can remove them from a group as needed. So I can see here that she's a member of 2 different marketing teams. So that's probably because there was already a marketing team and then I created that additional team. So you can see that I kind of generated an additional name with a random number there to demonstrate the team that had been created earlier during the demos. So we can select or remove her from a specific team. So let's say that this marketing team doesn't exist anymore, so we're going to remove her from there, and we can click remove, and you can see that her account is now no longer added to that group. So another option on the left-hand side is seeing devices. So we can see devices that have been assigned to Adele. Presently, there are no devices, which is fine. If she had logged into a specific device through Azure AD Join or something like that, then we would see the device show up under her account here. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and do that right now. So as we're exploring the options within the Admin Center, there are also controls that we can add that allow us to define Azure role assignments as well. So we've got our assigned roles as they're based on Microsoft 365 and Entra ID, adding permissions for specific directory roles as they relate to the other tools, the other admin centers, Teams, SharePoint, or as they relate directly to our specific Entra ID user administrator or things like that. So there are ways to flag through the different roles and then assign them accordingly. Additionally, there is the Azure role assignments portion, where here we can select a specific subscription that's been associated with the user account or with the tenant, and then assign that user specific roles to the tenancy. Now, from a device join perspective, as we're looking at the devices, she currently does not have a device as a member of the organization. But what we can do is go and add a device by demonstrating what that looks like from an Azure AD Join perspective. All right, so here we've got a virtual machine that's never been configured on a domain nor been connected to Microsoft Entra ID. So what we'll do is we'll just run through the quick configuration settings here. And this is not an autopilot device. It's really just a fresh install of Windows 11. And what I want to do is log into the Windows 11 device with Adele's account. And that will allow me to see that the device would then become Entra ID joined. So let's start by naming the device. You know what, let's just skip. It'll come up with its own random device name. There we go. So let's say set up for work or school, and let's log in with Adele's account. In order to do that, I just need to grab her email address. So let's go and grab that here. And we'll just type that in. So great, so it detects that she is a real account, and drop that password in there. And there we go. So now we should see the device start to register it. It'll check for any compliance or configuration policies that might be pushed through Intune, which we have not set up yet. So technically the device is just going to enroll itself into Entra ID, and then it'll show up under the device settings for Adele. So that's as complicated as it gets to pretty much enter or enroll a device. If you're on a domain, then typically it's the domain or it's the Active Directory of that domain that's doing that device enrollment. Otherwise, this is what it would look like just to enroll a device into Entra ID directly from a user account. So that's the entire experience. Now, give it a bit of time. Typically, if there are Intune policies, compliance or configuration policies that are coming down to that device, then at this point it's saying this is going to take a few minutes. It's going to start downloading any applications that might need to get pushed to it, any compliance policies or configuration settings that need to be applied. And typically it might require a couple reboots before it actually gets its full configuration. But typically from this standing, it'll get its default configuration based on the default ISO that was installed for this PC. Adele logs in and she's essentially good to go and start working with it. So now it's asking me to set up Windows Hello for Business, which is just a default configuration that it's asking for, but we can skip through that. And there we go. So now we're completely logged into a desktop and it should be joined to Entra ID. So let's go take a look at that. If we type in CMD, I'm just going to type in hostname. So we've got 1BN. So as you could see from earlier, Adele didn't have any devices associated to her account, but now technically we should see desktop 1BN. And we can see some interesting information from here as well. So we can see that the device is enabled, its operating system, the version of the operating system, whether or not it's Azure AD joined, which should be Entra ID joined. Is it MDM enrolled? Is it compliant? These are all information that will get added as we're configuring our Intune policies and our Intune compliance policies. But for the time being, it's functioning as expected. So there we go. Now, the Azure role assignments that I was calling out earlier, if there was a subscription associated with this tenant, then we would have additional options here. And let me show you what that looks like. Let me just pull up another tenant here. Because as we weren't discussing, enrolling in Azure or things like that, which if you're going to continue your learning process and look at, say, the AZ900 course, then that is definitely one that will deep dive into more details around how to handle Azure role assignments. But in this case, at this time, we were just talking about, some pretty basic high-level approaches to managing Entra ID and your users. So let me just pull this up. So here we go. If we go back into our users tab and we look at a specific user, so let's grab Adam's account and let's look at his Azure role assignments. So right now we can see the different subscriptions that are available to manage. And we can see that there are no role assignments assigned to Adam's account at the moment, which is fine, because typically we would only see something about that if the user was actually assigned something in particular. So if we go to find a user that actually has something assigned, let's go look up my account. And we look at Azure role assignments. We can see that I'm the owner of the FTE subscription. We can also see that I'm also a user access administrator for a couple of the resources here. So we can split between the different subscriptions and see additional information based on the parameters that were set within Azure. But that is something that we can see here, and that is something that we do have control over. So as we dig in, we could click through to this, go to the resource name, start changing permissions or adding other users that are part of the Entra ID to this role and expand on that. So if we flip back to the demo tenant here, where we're looking at Megan Bowen's account, there are also additional settings that can be configured on the left-hand side here. If we look at the protection settings and we look at our authentication methods, these are policies and configurations that allow us to define how we want our users to be able to connect and what are their requirements for connecting. So you can see there's a bunch of different options here. We've got hardware OAuth tokens, SMS, temporary access pass, Microsoft Authenticator. There's a bunch of different options that you can configure at this level. There's also one of them that's really interesting for those who are kind of getting started on this journey is the concept of an enrollment campaign. So what you can do here is configure this enrollment campaign that forces your users as they sign in to register themselves for multi-factor authenticator and establish those configurations in a rollout process so that it's not just enabled directly like that. You can roll this out and run the campaign and slowly roll that into your user production. So if we're looking at authentication strengths, there's some other options here where we can choose different levels of authentication dependent that we're going to apply to conditional access, which we'll look at that in a bit of time as well. Now, if we're looking at our settings, we can also see that there are different options here around reporting suspicious activities. We can set what our system preferred multi-factor authentication formats are, some additional options at that level. And we can also monitor, whether or not our users have successfully registered for MFA according to our campaigns that we've created and things like that. On the left, we also have password reset. Now, this is a great option for those who are either deploying directly to the cloud or are taking the hybrid approach and syncing their users from their Active Directory on-premise. Typically, password changes cause a lot of support calls to L1 support desk. A way to limit that is allowing your users to reset their own passwords. And in order to do so, they do need to have kind of a backing on the MFA front. They will have to have registered previously with MFA, or as part of your registration campaign, you can roll out the self-service password reset as part of that initial registration campaign. So as users are enrolling themselves for MFA, they're also getting ready to do the password reset. And in order to do that registration process, essentially we just have to say that we require users to register when they sign in. What are the numbers of days before users are asked to reconfirm their authentication information? So that would be MFAing back in. And how does this tie back to our on-premise Active Directory? Is this enabled for that password sync back to on-premise? So the on-premise integration aspect, this is where we'll see whether or not we've got an Azure AD Connect agent deployed on an on-premise server that's providing that synchronization. So right here, we see that there is no password write-back detected. Technically, this is a cloud-only account, and this is a cloud-only tenant at the moment. So there wouldn't be an agent here. But if you did have an agent deployed and it was configured for that password write-back, then here's where we could see additional information about that. So that pretty much covers the demo for showing the different settings that are available for an existing user. So including which groups they can be assigned, the availability of the different roles, as well as looking at different aspects of license assignment. So if we dig into a specific user and deep dive on their licensing. We already previously touched on that in one of the other demos, but just calling this out again, we can break down and add additional assignments here as needed directly from within the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. We can, select the individual items that we want a user to have access to or do not want to have access to. So let's say we won't want Kazela, let's just get rid of it. And now the user will no longer have access to that portion of the service. Technically though, keep in mind, what we do want to maintain is the largest possible activation of all the products across the board, because that gives you the best user experience. If you start disabling some things, can't guarantee that it wouldn't have an impact on another service that might be interconnected. So keep that in mind. As a SaaS solution, there is a lot of interconnectivity between the different applications. So that pretty much wraps up this portion of the demo where we talked about, the groups, the user's assignment for roles, where the different settings are for identity protection, how to enable the different authentication methods, and how those are tied to a user account. That pretty much covers it. All right, welcome back. Let's discuss some other functionalities of Microsoft Entra ID and how management capabilities are organized in that sense. So a key functionality of Microsoft Entra ID is obviously to manage access. So what we want to learn about is conditional access and how Entra roles and role-based access control helps organizations manage and control that access. So after completing this learning objective, you'll be able to describe conditional access in Microsoft Entra, as well as describe Microsoft Entra roles and role-based access control. Let's dive in. Conditional access. Okay, this is one of my favorite topics. It's implemented through policies that are created and managed in Microsoft Entra ID. So a conditional access policy analyzes signals, including user, location, device, application, risk, and automates decisions based on authorizing access to resources. So some really crazy, cool stuff going on behind the scenes here. It's taking all these signals and then making a decision on it. So conditional access policies at their simplest are if-then statements. So a conditional access policy might state that, if a user belongs to a certain group, then they need to provide multi-factor authentication to sign into a specific application. So we can really dig this down and segment it as much as we want. So a conditional access policy component. What does that look like, right? A conditional access policy in Microsoft Entra ID consists primarily of two components. Well, not primarily, it consists of two components, assignments and access controls. So assignments, when creating a conditional access policy, admins can determine which signals to use through assignments. The assignment portion of the controls is the who, what, where, and when of the policy, essentially. So all assignments are logically and. If you have more than one assignment configured, all assignments must satisfy to trigger a policy. So some of the assignments might include users and groups. So assign who the policy will include or exclude. Cloud apps or actions, so can include or exclude specific applications, can include or exclude user actions or authentication contexts that are subjected to the policy. And then we have conditions. Define where and when the policy will apply. Multiple conditions can be combined to create fine-grained and specific conditional access policies. And some of these conditions include sign-in risk and user risk. And so that's integrated through Entra identity protection and allows conditional access policies to identify suspicious actions related to user accounts in the directory and trigger a policy. So sign-in risk is the probability that a given sign-in or authentication request isn't authorized by the identity owner. User risk is the probability that a given identity or account is compromised. So keep that in mind. Those are two major points. Sign-in risk versus user risk. So user risk is the account compromised. Sign-in risk is that an authorized action by the owner of that identity. Then we have device platforms. So device platform, which is characterized by the operating system that runs the device. So that could be Android, iOS, mobile devices, Windows, etc. The IP location information. So organizations can define trusted IP address ranges that can be used when making policy decisions. So administrators can opt to block or allow traffic from an entire country or region's IP range if you want to do that. And then client apps, so the software that the user is employing to access the cloud app. So where are they connecting from? Is it a browser? Is it a mobile app? Is it a desktop client? And what is the decision that we want to make afterwards? We can also filter for devices. So we can enforce policies based on device properties. So is this an Azure or an Entra ID joined device? Is it a hybrid joined device? Does it have Windows 10 version 2102 installed? Exactly, we can make those differentiators and call out the filter as needed. So when we're talking about access controls, when the conditional access policy has been applied, an informed decision is reached on whether to block or grant access. And there might be a grant access with extra verification, or there might be a session control enabled to limit the experience. So we're essentially saying, okay, all these conditions have been met. Now what are we going to do? So this decision is referred to as the access control portion of the conditional access policy and defines really how the policy is enforced. So common decisions are block access. None of these conditions have been met, or all these conditions have been met because we're working on the deny sentence and we want to block access. Or we grant access, so without any additional control, or we can choose to enforce one or more other controls while granting access. So one of them would be, you can have access to this cloud application, but because it's a secure cloud application, we're going to ask you to MFA in again. So perform that multi-factor authentication attempt one more time just to confirm you are who you say you are, and that will give you access. But we can also include a session control, which is where we add additional limitations to the experience, such as a session timeout, or we block additional actions, or we can, prevent sign-in frequency, so you can only log into this application once every, 3 hours, something like that. It depends on what you're trying to do or what you're trying to accomplish, essentially, but the opportunity is there to add that additional control. And then as we expand into the more advanced functionalities of Entra ID, we can start tying things together with something like Defender for Cloud Apps, and that'll allow us to block downloading or cut and copy or print capabilities for anything that might be considered sensitive. So sensitive documents, or requiring a specific labeling of a sensitive file. So other session controls include sign-in frequency, application enforced restrictions. So for very selected applications, the device information, we must have very specific information, or we can limit to a very segmented section or the full experience depending on the device state. So your device isn't up to date, it's not compliant. We will allow you to connect enough to access your email, but that's it, or something like that. That's just an example. There's ways to limit the experience as needed, dependent on the conditions that are applied beforehand. So let's talk about RBAC, or role-based access control. So Microsoft Entra roles control permissions to manage Entra resources. So for example, allowing users to be created or billing information to be viewed, Microsoft Entra supports these built-in and custom roles. So a built-in role, some of the most common ones are your global administrator, your user administrator, and billing administrators. There are many built-in roles for different areas of responsibility. And definitely take a look at all the different roles through the documentation. And we'll be doing a quick demo following this segment here, but essentially you're going to want to pay attention to the RBAC roles especially. So all built-in roles are pre-configured bundles of permissions designed for specific tasks. So when you're talking about custom roles, there are many built-in admin roles in Entra where they might not give you as much flexibility as you require for a specific use case. So you can build custom Entra access roles, and it's a two-step process essentially. So you're creating a custom role definition, and that contains a collection of permissions that you add from a preset list. And then these permissions are the same ones used in the built-in roles, so you can kind of combine and mix and match as you need. And then you assign it to a user by creating a role assignment. So the role assignment grants the user permissions in a role definition and at a specified scope. So a custom role can be assigned at an organizational wide scope, meaning that the role member has the role permission over all resources, or a custom role can also be assigned as an object scope where we're targeting a very specific object or even a single application. So unlike built-in roles, which are assigned at the tenant level at all times and are pre-configured bundles of permissions designed for very specific tasks, custom roles can be assigned at the resource level. So, again, single application, or allow permissions to be added or removed from a custom role definition. So Entra role-based access control is essentially managing access using roles known as role-based access controls. And Microsoft Entra built-in and custom roles are a form of RBAC in that Microsoft Entra roles control access to Microsoft Entra resources. So really drawing out the definition here. The Microsoft Entra ID spans the scope of your Microsoft 365 tenancy. There are roles in there that will apply to other features and other functionalities and products within Microsoft 365. There is also specific roles that are targeted specifically to the product Microsoft Entra, or the product family, which is Microsoft Entra. So keep that in mind. Again, it's best practice to ensure that you only grant users the amount of permission that they need to get their work done. So we don't want to over-permission anything, really. So it's best practice and more secure to grant users the least privilege to get their work done. So it means that if someone mostly manages users, you should assign them user administrator role and not the global administrator role. So that just mitigates the risk of a user account being compromised and a hacker locking you out of your own account by assigning least privileges. So you limit the damage that could be done with a compromised account, essentially. So always keep in mind least privilege access. And that's actually one of the mentalities around zero trust. So another categorization of Microsoft Entra roles is to make it convenient to manage identity across all the Microsoft 365 services, which I kind of just touched on, right? It's part of the package deal. So Microsoft Entra has added some service-specific built-in roles, each of which grants administrative access to a specific Microsoft 365 service. So that means Microsoft Entra built-in roles differ where they can be used. So there are three broad categories, right? You've got Microsoft Entra, which has specific roles, and these roles grant permission to manage resources within Entra only. So for example, user administrator, application administrator, groups administrator, those all grant permissions to manage resources that live in Microsoft Entra. And then we've got service-specific roles. So for the majority of Microsoft 365 services, Entra includes built-in service-specific roles that grant permission to manage features within that service. So for example, Entra includes built-in roles for Exchange Administrator, Intune Administrator, SharePoint Administrator, Teams Administrator, and so on. And those specific roles can manage features within their respective service. Then there's also cross-service roles. So these are roles within Microsoft Entra that span services. So for example, Microsoft Entra has security-related roles like Security Administrator, and that grants access across multiple security services within Microsoft 365. And so similarly, the Compliance Administrator role gives you access to compliance-related settings in Microsoft Purview and in the Compliance Portal and Exchange and so on. So keep in mind, Entra is kind of that central hub. There are Entra-specific roles, but then you can also go and grab other product-specific roles. So what's the difference between Microsoft Entra RBAC and Azure RBAC? So although the concept of RBAC applies to both Microsoft Entra RBAC and Azure RBAC, what they control are different. So Entra RBAC is roles and control for access to Entra resources like users and groups. Azure RBAC controls access to Azure resources like virtual machines or storage or Azure Resource Manager or resource groups. So keep that segmentation in mind. They're not quite the same thing. There is crossover, but they are different things in some ways. So let's dive into Microsoft Entra conditional access, and we're going to walk through what that looks like. So in this demo, we'll walk through various options available for conditional access policies. So from the previous demo, I kind of left this window open where we were talking about different user aspects. Now let's dig into the identity protection portion of the conversation, where we're looking at conditional access policies and how they work within Entra ID. So under the protection flag here, under the protection option, we have an option for conditional access. So let's go ahead and click on that. Another good call out too is the little star icon on the side here. We can actually favorite different tools as needed, and that'll show up under the favorites icon by default there. So then we can quickly get and navigate through the site as needed. So now that we're under the conditional access page, let's go ahead and look at the different policies that have been created for this tenant. So looking at the policies, we've got a couple different policies that have been applied here. We can see that their current state is turned off. We can also see some additional information about when they were created and the timeline for that. We've also got an option to create policies from a custom standpoint where we're creating our own policy as we require, or we've got the option to create policies from templates. Now, policies from templates is really great to get started because we don't have any set format that's already been established within this organization. So we can really build off of these templates to help increase our overall security in our identity landscape. So one of the interesting ways to do so is just to select, from a foundational perspective, how we want to approach. Are we looking to build out our zero trust standpoint? Are we building this for users in a remote work scenario, and we've got a bunch of different templates that we can look to deploy? Are we looking to specifically protect our administrator accounts or potentially emerging threats? Or do we just want to view all of the different policies that are available? So for now, let's just start with the require multi-factor authentication for admins, because that's a pretty straightforward policy to create. So by default, when we select it, it's going to ask us to put the policy state in report only. And I'd recommend doing that just for the immediate, because report only won't have an impact on the user experience, but it will allow us to see within sign-in logs whether or not the policy is being applied to specific users, though it won't impact their session. So require multi-factor authentication for admins. This is great. Report only. Awesome. Let's look at users and groups that are applying to it. So the current user is excluded in this case because we don't want to lock out our own session if we were enabling this. However, the included roles that we want to apply this policy to are all the major security, the major administrator roles that are applied in the tenant. We can also see which cloud apps the policy is being applied to, and in this case, it's all apps, and will grant access as long as the administrator has performed multi-factor authentication. We can click Create here. And now that'll go ahead and create our policy. So here we've got a policy that's been created in a report-only state. We can go in and start modifying it. We can add or exclude specific users as we'd like to. We could exclude specific directory roles, and we can customize it as we need. So this is the same view here from a modification standpoint that we would see if we are editing or creating a new policy. We can X out of here or even delete the policy from this window as well. So that's an example of deploying the policy from a template. Now let's say we want to deploy a new policy, but we really want to have a customizable experience where we can deploy this for a very specific cloud app that might be a custom app that we've deployed into our organization. So let's create a new policy, and let's call this one outside of the office. So let's say that we have a very specific IP address that is assigned, or a trusted location that's assigned to our office location, and that allows us to make decisions around where the authentication attempt is coming from. So in this case, we've got outside the office is the name of our conditional access policy. Our users will include all users, except we will exclude users that are global administrators. So, sorry, not users. We'll want to select directory roles. So let's say we're excluding global administrators because we always want global administrators to say MFA even if they're coming from the office. Next up, we'll select our target resources. We could select, all cloud apps, and that will include everything, or we could select very specific cloud apps where we can filter for, a very specific cloud application as needed. Except in this case, let's not bother getting into the filter, and we'll just go and select a specific one. Let's say it is Microsoft Forms. So for some reason, Megan really just wants to make sure that only admins have to MFA to Microsoft Forms if they're logging into Microsoft Forms from the office location. So we've selected our users, we've selected our target resource, now we need to select our conditions. Our condition would be all trusted locations. So a trusted location is defined in another area of the conditional access portal, and we'll show you that afterwards. So as we're looking through this, we've got our users being applied, our target resource, which is our application, which is Microsoft Forms. We're also excluding any global administrator, and our condition is that they're coming from a trusted location. So if they're coming from a trusted location, they're any user except global administrators. We'll just grant access without requiring any controls. So they're good to go. So that's all we need to do. Now, if they were, if we wanted to exclude all users from this, or if we wanted to do something different, then we just have to adjust the policy as necessary. So there's multiple other options and ways to design this in that sense, but that's an example of a way to create a custom policy. So I'm not going to apply that right now, but just wanted to walk you through how that would look. So let's say our require multi-factor authentication for admins is the one that we're going with. We deployed that from the template. Now we're sitting at the require multi-factor authentication. That's looking good, except we also wanted to add an additional control, and that being session frequency. So let's say that we want to prevent the admin from having a session that's longer than 1 day, and we also want to actually let's cut back a couple of seconds.
All right, so just explain to me where we.
So I started talking about session controls.
All right, so take it away from there.
Okay. So we're looking at our require multi-factor authentication for our admins. Let's say we wanted to expand on that a little bit, and we wanted to specify, very specific locations. And we want to add additional session controls like preventing the admin from having a persistent browser session. So if they're accessing a specific application, then we don't want that session to store a token so that they can just log in again and again. We want them to have to authenticate every time. So in order to do that, what we can do is go into target resource here, and instead of having all cloud apps selected, let's go ahead and select just Office 365. So if the admin is using Office 365, we will grant access as long as they match their multi-factor authenticator request. And we also want to expand that and add a sign-in frequency that is no longer than, every 4 hours they have to sign in again, and we will leave it at that. So if they have Office 365 open, then every 4 hours they're going to have to re-authenticate just to make sure that they are who they say they are, and that it's a secure access. So you can see how this could be customized to really target specific applications that an admin might have to increase their overall authentication attempts to, in order to maintain access to that, because it's a secure application. So Office 365, definitely wouldn't recommend doing that for your admins because that would be kind of a pain, but sign-in frequency is something that you can use as a combined approach to forcing your users to sign in dependent on the conditions that you want to apply. So conditional access policies are very powerful, and you can control how your users are signing in and logging in. The way you see how that behavior is being treated is by looking at your sign-in logs. And so through the sign-in logs, we can see who's accessing what, from where, from what device, from what location, what conditional access policies are being applied. So right now we can see that there are no conditional access policies being applied. So why don't we go and, well, actually Megan wouldn't be a good example because we're excluding her from the session. Let's go and grab a different user then. So I've never logged in with this specific user since enabling this policy. So let's go ahead and log into admin.microsoft.com. So let's go ahead and log in with our admin. So we'll select our admin account and let's input our password for the admin account. And now it's asking me if I want to stay signed in or not. So the admin portion is fine, right? Like we're not hitting that specific conditional access request. So if we go back to conditional access here and we update that, sometimes this can take up to about 15 minutes before it actually populates, and sometimes it can take longer than that. It really depends on how fast it's hitting the services. However, what we can see is that we can see different prompts coming in throughout the time. So let's see if we can make this work in a way that will prompt this specific user for MFA. Now, as we had been discussing, we do want to make sure that there are policies configured from a login standpoint that force our authentication methods. So let's go ahead and enable multi-factor authentication for this user. So we'll say all users, and let's go with password. You know what, let's just leave it at any. So we'll let them pick and choose whether or not it's push or passwordless. We can also add additional configuration items here, whether or not we want to, change the way that the passwordless notifications are managed. In this case, let's just go ahead and enable Microsoft Authenticator, and let's go modify our conditional access policy here so that when I log in with my user account with my admin, so we've got all these different roles selected. We're only excluding Megan Bowen, so my admin account should hit that. R1 app is Office 365. Let's just get rid of that and we'll say all cloud apps. So it doesn't matter which cloud app you're logging into, it's going to trigger this conditional access policy if you're a global administrator and will require multi-factor authentication. So it's in report only. So technically within my sign-in logs, I should see a prompt for the fact that this admin tried to sign in, but let's go and make this a little bit more complicated and see if we can actually get this to prompt properly. And let's go and enable the policy. And let's try to see if this works. Start another in private session. Let's go to admin. And I'll go grab my admin account. There. So I just enabled the authentication context where I'm forcing my administrator to register for multi-factor authentication. So it's telling me that more information is required to log in. Now, this will be for any user that's using the tenant because I didn't select specific users when I made that configuration choice. So now it's going to prompt me with the configuration aspect of registering. It'll give me a QR code that then I can scan to set up my Microsoft Authenticator app. So I'm hitting that first layer and I'm hitting the authentication method selection where I'm actually going and starting to register for Microsoft Authenticator and using that as my sign-in methodology. From a conditional access standpoint, then afterwards what I would hit is my multi-factor authenticator for admins. It would prompt my authenticator app on my cell phone. I would then approve it or do the number matching scenario, which would then allow me to access afterwards the backend application that I'm trying to access. So from a sign-in logs perspective, let's go see if we see anything now. Chances are we won't see anything. It does take some time for this to show up after an authentication attempt, but we can dig through and see if there is something coming up so far. Yeah, so far we're not seeing that authentication prompt coming in, but that's normal. That's normal behavior because it does take some time for this to come in. However, what we can do is look at what that sign-in log looks like. And so from basic information, we could see where what type of application is being prompted, what the location of that connection is from, some device information, authentication details, whether or not the first factor had already been provided, is that satisfactory, and what conditional access policies are applying to that authentication prompt. So right now we can't see that recent prompt that I did for the admin. That's okay. It will show up eventually. We just have to give it some time for the backend to synchronize those logs. So check back later and it should show up. So in this demo, we kind of walked through a bunch of different stuff. We looked at conditional access policies. We looked at the authentication enablement for authentication methods. We enabled MFA. We deployed a policy from a template. We also walked through the creation of its own policy and the different options that are available there. And we kind of generally just looked at how that would work from an authentication attempt. So keep in mind there are best practices around this, and feel free to reach out to a service like Fast Track for Microsoft 365 to get some additional assistance on deploying your conditional access if you're in that state. Thank you. All right, protecting against cyber threats with Microsoft 365 Defender across endpoints, identities, email, and applications. So let's talk about Microsoft 365 Defender. 365 Defender is an enterprise defense suite that protects against sophisticated cyber attacks. So Microsoft Defender 365 Defender suite protects email and collaboration, endpoints, applications, identities, assets, and ultimately provides this great XDR experience that you can centralize with one portal and kind of give visibility across all the different aspects and telemetry of all your devices. So let's dive into each of those points individually and see how they align. So when we talk about email and collaboration with Microsoft 365, how do we protect that exactly? Well, there's a product called Microsoft Defender for Office 365, and that helps safeguard our organization against malicious threats posed by email messages, links and URLs, and collaboration tools. So it'll help prevent phishing messages and things like that from getting in. Next up, how do we protect our endpoints? Well, we can use Defender for Endpoint, and Defender for Endpoint is a unified endpoint platform for preventative protection, post-breach detection, and automated investigation and response. So a lot of fancy words there, but essentially it is your AV and EDR all in one. Applications with Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So how do we protect those applications? MDA. So Defender for Cloud Apps is a comprehensive cross SaaS solution that brings a better, a much deeper visibility and strong data controls and enhanced threat protection to your cloud apps. What does that mean? Well, we're going to dig into each of these individually afterwards because there's a lot more to cover on each of these aspects. Protecting identities. Well, Defender for Identity is a great product that looks at Active Directory signals to identify, detect, and investigate advanced threats. So compromised identities from an on-premise perspective, as well as malicious insider actions directed at your organization. And then Defender Vulnerability Management helps protect our assets by using intelligent risk-based assessments and built-in remediation tools to help security and IT teams prioritize and address critical vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in the organization. So if you're a subscriber to Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence, you can also access the Threat Intelligence portal from inside the Microsoft 365 Defender portal now. So let's talk about Microsoft 365, Microsoft Defender for Office 365. So what is it? Well, it's a seamless, integrated approach to Office 365 that allows protection against threats that arrive in email links, so URLs, attachments, or collaboration tools like SharePoint, Teams, and Outlook. Defender for Office 365 provides real-time views of threats and tools you can use to stay safe ahead of potential threats. So what does it include? Well, there's functionalities like preset security policies, and these security policies allow you to apply protection features to users based on Microsoft recommended settings. A use case for a preset security policy is during installation. An installation by preset can set up everything for you and just using the recommended setup, and it automates the rollout of a secure environment. However, keep in mind that a preset is a great baseline. It still needs, think of this as an ever evolving approach. You're always going to need to improve. You're always going to need to look and investigate and improve. So a preset configuration, great way to start out. Definitely not the be all end all. Deploy the preset. Look at how it's behaving in your environment and improve it. Threat protection policies. So defining threat protection policies to set the appropriate level of protection for your organization. So definitely something as part of our baseline, we'll set our default policy, and then we'll look into the threat protection policies and improve them as required for the organization. And it also includes reports, which will let us see real-time reports to monitor Defender for Office 365 performance in the organization. So we also have threat investigation and response capabilities. So using leading edge tools to investigate and understand and simulate and prevent threats. So simulate's a key word there too. We can also run campaigns against our own internal users to demonstrate how a phishing response would work, and then provide training as a result of the action that the user takes. So automated investigation and response capabilities. So we can save time by allowing the AI essentially to take care of the threat if there is one. So that'll help mitigate any potential issues. So Defender for Office 365 is available in two plans. You've got Defender for Office 365 Plan 1 and Plan 2. These services are built upon the core protections offered by Exchange Online. So keep in mind there are three different products that I'm talking about here. I'm talking about Defender for Office 365 P1, so Plan 1, Defender for Office 365 Plan 2, and Exchange Online Protection. So Exchange Online Protection, which I'm about to cover, is included in any Exchange Online license, essentially. You have it by default. Microsoft 365, Defender for 365, Office 365 is a tool that augments what EOP is capable of, so Exchange Online Protection. So let's dive into what Exchange Online Protection looks like. So EOP helps prevent broad volume-based known attacks and is present again in any subscription where Exchange Online mailboxes can be found. So Office 365 P1 contains EOP in it, and plus it protects email and collaboration from zero-day malware, phishing, and business email compromise. Now, if we talk about Defender for Office 365 P2, that contains P1 and EOP and adds post-breach investigations, hunting, response, automation, and that training simulation aspect. So the structure is cumulative as it is shown in the image here. All right, let's talk about endpoints. Defender for Endpoint is a platform designed to help enterprise networks protect endpoints, including laptops, phones, tablets, access points, routers, firewalls. And so what does it do? Well, it does that by preventing and detecting and investigating and responding to all these advanced threats. So Defender for Endpoint embeds technology built into Microsoft Windows 10 and beyond, so Windows 11 and plus, and Microsoft Cloud Services. So it's cross-cloud, on-premise, in the cloud as well. And this technology includes endpoint behavioral sensors. They're embedded in Windows 10 11. And beyond that, collect and process signals from the operating system. So cloud security analytics that translate behavioral signals into insights. And that'll take those insights and detections and recommend response for advanced threats. So threat intelligence as well that enables Defender for Endpoint to identify attacker tools, techniques, and procedures that they might be using and generate alerts when they're observed in the collected sensor data. So some of the interesting aspects of Defender for Endpoint that I just want to call out in specific is a differentiator here, because there are a couple different functionalities that are called out. And as you can see within the image that's on the screen, we've got the threat and vulnerability management, attack surface reduction, next generation protection, which includes the antivirus, the EDR, so endpoint detection and response, the AIR, so automated investigation remediation, as well as Microsoft Threat Experts. But let's touch on two primary ones that a lot of people get kind of confused about sometimes, and that would be the next gen protection and the EDR. Think of these as two separate individual products, right? They work together. They're all part of the Defender for Endpoint product, but they're two separate tools that do very different things. The EDR capability is very specific to the cloud aspect, right? It's taking signals from your devices and is looking for zero-day or unknown threats that have never occurred before, and then making decisions on that. Your antivirus, so the next generation protection, is looking for known threats, things that it already knows exists, and is looking for signals that indicate that there is a known threat on the device. So keep those two separate because they're not one and the same. Attack surface reduction is also a really great tool because it provides first line of defense in the stack. So what it does is, ensuring that your configuration settings are properly set. We can mitigate exploits and mitigate the techniques that are used to exploit in order to establish a persistent threat. And so these sets of capabilities also include, network protection, web protection, and that regulates access to malicious IP addresses, domains, and URLs. So some of the aspects that are really interesting around the next generation protection is the AIR, so the automated investigation remediation. So this is technology that's automated, that provides automation to the investigation and uses various inspection algorithms and is based on processes that are used by security analysts. So the AIR capabilities are designed to examine alerts and take immediate action to resolve breaches. So it can help you improve your performance when it comes to resolving issues by backing you up on that sense. Now let's dig into Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. And what is it? Well, essentially it's a CASB solution that helps provide protection for SaaS applications. So you want to protect your software as a service application, you can pump it through your cloud app security broker, which in this case would be Defender for Cloud Apps. And well, what does it do? Well, a CASB is essentially a gatekeeper to broker real-time access between enterprise users and cloud resources. So a CASB helps organizations protect their environment by providing a wide range of capabilities across key functional areas. So this can give us visibility into cloud app usage as well as shadow IT, and it helps protect against app-based threats from anywhere in the cloud. It also can be used to apply information protection and compliance. So if you need to use advanced DLP functionalities from a SaaS perspective, then this is definitely the tool for you. The SaaS Security Posture Management, or SSPM, features enabling security teams to improve the organization's security posture. And then we've also got the Advanced Threat Protection as part of Microsoft's Extended Detection and Response solution, so our XDR, by enabling powerful correlation of signal across the different kill chains. So as we're looking at the full kill chain of these advanced attacks, you're pulling in signals from MDE, MDA, MDO, and potentially MDI. It depends on the configuration you're using. App-to-app protection, extending the core threat scenarios to OAuth-enabled apps as well that have permissions and privileges to critical data and resources. So if we dig in a little deeper into each of these functionalities, like the core CASB functionality includes pretty much discovery and visibility. So what don't you know? You don't know what you don't know, so let's find out what you don't know. And with this discovery, you can enable other CASB functionalities, including threat protection, information protection and compliance, and discover all those SaaS applications. So, discovering the SaaS application, what is the full picture? What is my environment currently using? What does that app usage look like? Who has access to it? What are they doing with it? So we can identify those Defender Cloud apps that are being used, and then look at the data based on the assessment of network traffic and extensive app catalogs as well that we can tie in directly with the CASB solution. So essentially what we're doing is evaluating and assessing, the current discovery of those applications, and we're looking at 90 different risk indicators. Actually, we have more than 90 risk indicators. And this allows us to sort through the discovered apps and assess the organization's security and compliance posture. We can also use this to set our policies, and that help us monitor apps around the clock. So for example, if anomalous behavior happens, like unusual spikes in usage, you're automatically alerted and guided to action. Information protection. So Defender for Cloud Apps connects to SaaS apps and scans for files containing sensitive data. And what it does is look for, what type of data is being stored where and who's accessing it. So to protect this data, you can then implement controls like applying a sensitivity label or blocking download to an unmanaged device or removing external collaborators on this confidential file. So the Defender for Cloud Apps integration with Purview also enables security teams to leverage the out-of-box data classification types. And in the information protection policies and control sensitive information, lets us apply DLP functionalities to this solution. So SaaS security posture management, as well as the SSPM, really just helps us dive in and dig into that organizational improvement actions from our security posture, surfacing misconfigurations and recommending actions that'll strengthen our security posture. When we're talking about the advanced threat protection aspect of this, cloud apps are targets for attackers, and attacks often start from email as the most common entry point, and then they tend to move laterally to compromise endpoints and identities before ultimately gaining access to in-app data. So Defender for Cloud Apps offers built-in adaptive access control, or AAC, and that provides users an entity behavior analysis, so UEBA, and helps you mitigate these types of attacks. So Defender for Cloud Apps is also integrated directly into Microsoft 365 Defender, so it really gives us that whole visibility from an XDR approach. So let's dig into it. Let's dive into Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps and take a look at what it looks like in a real-world scenario. So here's a demo on Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. All right, so in this demo, we're going to be walking through the capabilities of Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, and we'll be walking through and talking through the different information available on the Cloud Discovery dashboard, what's available in the Cloud App Catalog, capabilities available to investigate findings in the activity log as well as files, and ways to control impact to our organization through policies. So note, an organization does have to have a license to use Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, and that's because it is a user-based subscription service. So in the address bar, what we're going to want to type in is admin.microsoft.com or security.microsoft.com. If we go to security.microsoft.com, then we'll get right to the Microsoft 365 Defender dashboard. If we want to go directly to the admin center and then click through to the security dashboard, that is also an option. Again, multiple ways to get to the same location. So once we're into the Microsoft 365 Defender dashboard, we can scroll down on the left-hand side here and see different cloud apps options that are tied to Defender for Cloud Apps. Now, we can click on the Cloud Discovery portion, and this is where we're going to see our initial dashboard. Now, keep in mind, last 30 days is the default view. We can actually get a better view if we click farther out, and then we'll see a lot more information tied to different cloud app services that are being used within the tenancy. So let's dig into the discovered cloud apps and try to find some more information about what's going on in the tenant. So let's dive into discovered apps here. So as we're exploring through the discovered apps portion, we can see different apps here. And so Fastly kind of caught my attention. Let's go ahead and explore what that is. So we can click on the actions item, which is the ellipsis on the side of the application, and we can start tagging the app for specific use cases. And we can also even deploy conditional access policies directly from the application itself. We can edit the app details, and if we say click edit the app details, we can also define specific app domains, configure advanced logon sessions, use different session controls, things like that. So there's a lot of options to how we want to handle this application, but let's just click on it and explore a bit more information about what it is and why it's there. So it gives us a rundown of what the application is, what it does, and it kind of gives us a decent idea of what's going on here. So what we can see is that from a risk score, it's a risk score of 9. So it's not very high on the risky applications that might break some compliance standards or things like that. But we can see additional information about each of the individual aspects of the application. We can look at data classification, certificate names, things like that that might indicate that maybe the application isn't a compliant app. One of the important points to call out here is that the information provided in the Cloud Discovery page and the related tabs are based on either snapshot reports from traffic logs that we've manually uploaded from our firewalls or proxies, or from continuous reports that analyze all logs that are forwarded from our network using Cloud App Security. So where we can see if this is set up is going into the actions item in the top corner of the page here. So let's go ahead and look at some more ways to get log information into discovered apps. So what we can do is click up here on the actions page and create a Cloud Discovery snapshot report, configure automated upload. We can generate a bunch of different options here or create new policies, things like that. So in this case, what we're going to want to do is create a Cloud Discovery snapshot report. And we'll click next. Let's name this, I don't know, call out, let's say, first report, test, and where are we importing this information from? Is there a specific application that we're trying to pull in, or a specific firewall or something like that? So let's say we're pulling it in from Forefront. Do we want to anonymize private information? And then we upload the traffic logs and upload those logs, and we're good to go. So once that gets pulled in, then it'll start looking and analyzing the additional information that's coming from our on-premise router or firewall. Now, within Microsoft 365 Defender Cloud Apps, you can connect apps directly by setting up app connectors that'll provide greater visibility and control over the cloud apps. So from the top right corner of the screen, again, we can click on Actions, and we can select Cloud Discovery Settings. And on the left-hand side here, we've got a bunch of different options that show up. But under Cloud Discovery, we'll see Connected Apps and App Connectors. And so what we can do here is say connect an app. And when we pop this up, there's a lot of different applications that come up by default. ServiceNow, Slack, for a few examples, Zoom. We can also suggest more apps. If we want to have applications included by default, we can tell Microsoft directly, hey, you're missing this application. We really need it for this reason. Feel free to contact me about that information, and then submit it, and it'll give us that feedback so we can try to get your application included as soon as possible. So let's say we're just going with a default one like, Salesforce. So now we've got some information about Salesforce that we do need to fill out. We've got some information about the application that we need to fill out. And we can walk through the different steps here. So I don't know if it'll accept that, but yeah, so we just follow the information and it'll guide us through the process of configuring our applications and the linking back to the cloud application discovery portion. Now, While we're on the Cloud Apps settings page, it's worth spending a few minutes also exploring some of the other cloud discovery settings. So one of them being one of them being the conditional access app control applications, and so that's under here. And so the conditional access app control adds real-time monitoring and control capabilities to applications that are tied to Entra ID. And so from there, we can also add additional configurations, such as tying things into Microsoft information protection, things like that. So from here, we can search for a specific SAML application that we might want to tie into the configuration. And there's a ton of different applications that are available that'll help us walk through a wizard and where we configure this SAML application. So we can add additional applications as needed. We can search for that application and then just walk through the wizard configuration aspect as needed. So let's say, let's just pick the first one here, fine, .NET Fiddle. We can upload the information about the configuration for the SAML connector. We can fill it out ourselves if needed and walk through the configuration through this wizard. If it's not already integrated, this is an option to add additional applications to the connected apps configuration. Another thing that we'd want to do is make sure that we've configured information protection and its tie into Defender for Cloud Apps. This is crucial because what we're going to want to do is have Defender for Cloud Apps able to scan files that are stored and labeled appropriately with Microsoft information protection, because this will help us run DLP scenarios where we want to prevent information from being shared too largely outside of the organization. So we can return to the Cloud App Discovery dashboard by simply clicking Cloud Discovery here, and it'll take us right back to our homepage and our dashboard view. So that covers part one of this multi-part demo. We'll be kicking off part two shortly. All right, so in this part of the demo, we'll show capabilities of the Cloud App Catalog. Using Cloud Discovery helps analyze our traffic logs against Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps Cloud App Catalog, and that contains over 31,000 cloud apps. The apps are ranked and scored based on more than 80 risk factors to help provide us with ongoing visibility into cloud use, shadow IT, and the risk shadow IT poses in your organization. So in order to get to the Cloud App Catalog, from the left navigation panel under Cloud Apps in the security.microsoft.com portal, we can go ahead and click on Cloud App Catalog. The Cloud App Catalog enables you to choose apps that fit your organization's security requirements, so admins can do basic filtering of apps as shown on the top of the page. So this includes whether the app is sanctioned, unsanctioned, or has no tag, has no risk score, has a risk score, compliance risk factor, security risk factor. So for example, filtering by compliance risk factor lets you search for specific standards, certification, and compliance that the app may comply with. So examples would include HIPAA or ISO 27001, SOC 2, PCI DSS. So a bunch of different ways that we can kind of move through these, the filtering of these cloud apps. So these aren't the cloud apps that have been discovered in your organization. That's what we previously saw where we were looking at cloud discovery. These are the cloud apps that are available within the catalog that have already been previously classified. So we can decrease the risk score to see cloud apps that might be considered risky according to Microsoft's risk score analysis, right? So if you start seeing applications like this showing up in your organization, then we might want to start adding some additional layers of protection against those applications and apply specific controls to it. Admins can also search for apps by category. So for example, in the search category field, we could enter in social network. So why don't we just put this back to here? And let's look for category and we'll say social network, and we can select social network. We can see all the social networks that'll pop up here as potentials. We can also, again, lower the risk score. Let's put it to 0, see what pops up. No social networks with a risk score of 0, so let's put it to 1, see if there's anything. All right, so after looking through these different applications and playing around with the filtering and looking at the risk scores, this will give us some idea of how we want to limit things. So the idea behind this is that we can automatically go and decide, well, within our organization, from a social networking categorization perspective, anything that's a risk score of 3 or under, we're just going to build a policy that blocks it, or we're going to tag them as unsanctioned. So users that attempt to use these social network applications online will get prevented from doing so. So that covers the second part of this demo. Next up, we're going to be talking about exploring the activity log and files. All right, so in this part of the demo around cloud apps, we're going to explore the activity log and files. So this will allow us to see ways that we can investigate recorded activities within the activity log and files. So from the third part of this demo, we're going to be talking about activity log as well as files. So this is going to explore ways in which we can investigate the recorded activities within the activity log and files. So within this tenant, what we can do is go and click on the activity log, always underneath of cloud apps. And here, chances are, this is a demo tenant. There's not going to be too much information on this, so it'll be challenging to actually see if there is anything. We can try to investigate 6 months back. Yeah, we're not going to see anything on this tenant. That doesn't mean that you won't see that in a different tenant scenario or when you're actually using this in production, but we'll be able to go and start filtering back through content and looking for specific activities that have been happening within your cloud apps, as well as which user was using the app and from which location, things like that. So this is a location that will help us do that discovery aspect. From a data protection point of view. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we do have some information popping up here. Well, that's lucky. I went scanned back a little bit farther and I did find something. All right, so here I scanned back a bit farther within the 6 month time frame, and we do see that there are some activities going on within my tenant environment. So I can see, which application and from what IP address, which user was doing something, what the commands were. So this is an example of things that are going on premise and how that relates to our cloud app instances. However, typically what we'd be seeing is cloud applications that are actually running in the cloud. So the advantage here is that we're seeing some information coming back from our Active Directory and some announcements that are coming back from there. So it's kind of an interesting view, and it does tie back to on-premise, but you'll also see information, and you can filter on information that is coming from specific apps. So we can add additional filters here, and we could say, the application that we want to look at is, detecting what is available here. It's seeing only Active Directory and some online services. So why don't we go ahead and see what's coming up from OneDrive for Business. And it's not showing up anything. So it looks like the activities that I'm able to find are ones from my Active Directory through different sync methodologies that I'd previously set up with a previous lab, which is good because we just get to see what that would look like from an activity standpoint. So then we can drill into individual commands, see how that was configured, what it was running, where it's coming from, the activity count, who's doing what, where the service is, what the application is, and where that is coming from a source standpoint. So this was through an app connector that had previously been configured for directory service replication. So moving on, let's look at the files view. So this is perfect. So this had not been previously enabled for the file monitoring. So one of the first steps that we need to do in order to have Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps get visibility into files that are being connected from our cloud apps is, first of all, to enable it. So what we want to do is going through the file option is we're going to go ahead and enable file monitoring. And so that's going to open us up to a different area of the portal where we can go ahead and get that configured. So what we do is we click Enable File Monitor, and this will allow us to see files in our SaaS apps. Click Save, and it should be good to go now. So what we'll do is go to the Files view again, underneath of Cloud Apps. And it'll start pulling different information from across the tenancy according to the different applications. And it will start filling out, information, and we can start filtering by data through the application, the owner, the access level, the file type, whether or not it matched a specific policy that we might have configured. But it's a way to search through the different information here and find out where files are living or how they are being treated, and whether or not they're being shared or overshared from a DLP concern as well. So that covers the part 3 of this demo so far, where we talked about activity log and files. So next up is part 4, where we are exploring policies. So let's kick that off right away. All right, so part 4 of this demo, we're going to be looking at exploring policies. And in this part, we'll show options available for creating and managing policies within Defender for Cloud Apps. So from the left-hand navigation panel here, if we scroll down, we can see there's a policies option. We can expand that and then hop into policy management. Policy management have a list of policies and they provide information on the number of alerts generated by the policy, whether or not there is a severity rating, things like that. So selecting any line item provides more detailed information about the policy. So what we can do is select an item from the list. Let's select this one, and we can select the activity policy, and then we can view different options around the policy and how it's been configured. We can also create policies back at the main page. So here we're just looking at the edit anomaly detection policy. We've got a breakdown and a description of what the policy is, the different cloud apps that it's utilizing, and some additional options that we could create and customize there if we wanted to. So let's X out of that one. We'll just cancel there. And from here, we can also even create our own policy if we want to. So if we select create a policy, we could create our own activity policy. And we could create a repeated activity, a single activity, and we can create specific information around it. So are we building this off of a policy template? What's the policy name? So let's just put a temporary policy. What is the policy severity? Is it a high severity, medium severity, or low severity? So that's dependent on what kind of categorization I want to deploy. So if I'm doing data loss prevention, then I might want to put this as a high severity because I'm trying to detect activities of a user trying to exfiltrate information from the tenancy. So you can customize that and optimize it as you see fit. We can also go and select additional activities and then drill through each of the activities that must be a match for the policy to trigger. Then afterwards, we can decide whether or not we want to send alerts, we want to receive alerts, how do we want to configure the governance actions afterwards, do we want to lock down the application, things like that. So there's a lot of options through here, through the policy management portion when we create a policy. So I'm just going to X out of here and head back to the policy area view here. Also note that there's an option to export policy information here where we can say export, we can select a time frame, how far back do we want to go. We can click into additional information about individual policies as well and dive into specific matches or things like that that have happened within the policy and how it's been treated. So, I just clicked on one there to see if that'll pull up. There might not be too much information on here given that it is a lab environment. And there we go. So now we can see alerts that have been generated. There are no alerts coming from that policy, which is a good thing. So that just means I don't have any alerts ongoing in my environment. So essentially in this demo, what we walked through were capabilities of Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. We talked about information that's available from a Cloud App Discovery dashboard. We looked through the Cloud App Catalog, and we talked about capabilities available to investigate findings within the activity log and files, and ways to control impact to the organization through applying policies or creating custom policies as necessary. So that wraps up this portion of the demo. Thank you. Microsoft Defender for Identity. is a cloud security solution, and it uses our on-premise Active Directory data, which we call signals, to identify, detect, and investigate advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider actions directed at your organization. So Defender for Identity covers pretty much these key areas here, which are monitoring user profile behavior and activities, and protecting user identities and reducing the attack surface. And we're also going to look for suspicious activities and advanced attacks from the cyber attack kill chain. So what do we mean by monitoring profile user behavior and activities? Well, it looks at user activities and information across your network, including permissions, group membership, and creates a behavioral baseline for each user. So Defender for Identity then identifies anomalies with adaptive built-in intelligence, and it gives insights into suspicious activities and events, revealing advanced threats, compromised users, and insider threats facing the organization. Protect user identities and reduce attack surface. So Defender for Identity gives invaluable insights on identity configurations and suggested security best practices, and that's through security reports and user profile analytics. So Defender for Identity helps reduce the organizational attack surface by making it really hard to compromise user credentials and advance the attack. So for hybrid environments in which ADFS is deployed, so Active Directory Federation services, Defender for Identity protects ADFS by detecting on-premise attacks and providing visibility into the authentication events generated by ADFS. So when I'm saying identify suspicious activities and advanced attacks across the cyber attack kill chain, typically attacks are launched against any accessible entity, such as low privilege user, things like that. So attacks then quickly move laterally until the attacker accesses some valuable asset. So these assets might include sensitive accounts, domain administrators, highly sensitive data. Defender for Identity will identify these advanced attacks at the source throughout the entire cyber attack kill chain. And so looking primarily at reconnaissance, compromised credentials, lateral movements, domain dominance, things like that. And then it allows us to investigate and receive alerts on these user activities. So it's designed to reduce the general alert noise, providing only relevant and important security alerts in a simple and real-time organizational attack timeline. So it allows us to stay focused on what matters. And you can also use it to quickly investigate threats and gain insight across the organization for users and devices and network resources as well. So it just gives you that overall better visibility into what's going on in your organization from a authentication perspective. Defender Vulnerability Management delivers asset visibility, intelligent assessments, and built-in remediation tools for Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and iOS and Android and network devices as well. So what is it doing in the back end? Well, it's pretty much just sitting there scanning and looking for assets. It's just sitting there monitoring and trying to discover other assets. And it's trying to look for risk essentially in the organization. So it uses built-in agentless scanners and is constantly monitoring and detecting risk in the organization, even when devices aren't connected to the corporate network. So what this provides is a consolidated inventory in real time, a view of your organization's software applications, digital certificates, hardware, firmware, browser extensions even, that help monitor and assess your organization's assets. And then risk-based intelligent prioritization. So Defender Vulnerability Management leverages Microsoft's threat intelligence, so the breach likelihood predictions, as well as business contexts and device assessments to quickly prioritize the biggest vulnerabilities in your organization. So when you see it at the top, it's because it's been classified at the top of your priority list. So definitely get that taken care of. Risk-based intelligent prioritization focuses on emerging threats to align the prioritization of these recommendations with the vulnerabilities currently being exploited in the wild. So we have that visibility across the world and allowing us to, promote that risk to each individual organization according to their actual configurations. So that risk-based intelligent prioritization also pinpoints active breaches and protects high-value assets. So a single view of prioritized recommendations from multiple security feeds along with critical details related to common vulnerabilities and exposures. So you get details from the CVEs as well as exposed devices will just help us quickly and help you quickly remediate your biggest vulnerabilities for your most critical assets. Now, remediation and tracking. Remediation and tracking allows you to view the issues with built-in workflows. So you can assign it to your administrators, your security administrators, IT administrators to collaborate, and they'll be able to see these remediation issues that they can work out and build through workflow. So the Insight Dashboard is a vulnerability management capability in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal that lets us view our exposure score and Microsoft's secure score for devices. So along with top security recommendations, it includes the software vulnerability, remediation activities, exposed devices, things like that. And it lets us correlate endpoint detection or response insights with the endpoint vulnerabilities and process them. So that lets us, then triage and then pick and choose what we want to remediate first and then assign remediation tasks. So we can also select exception options in case there is a specific exception. Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence, or Defender TI, is something that helps streamline security analyst triage and incident response for threat hunting and vulnerability management workflows. So Defender TI aggregates and enriches the critical threat information in a really easy to use interface. So Defender TI's threat intelligence homepage allows analysts to quickly scan new featured articles and search for a keyword, an artifact, or common vulnerability and exposure ID, so a CVE ID, and shows you the featured Microsoft content as well. So Defender TI articles are narratives by Microsoft that provide insight into threat actors and tooling and attacks and vulnerabilities. So Defender TI articles are not blog posts about threat intelligence. While they summarize different threats, they also link to actionable content and key indicators of compromise so that you can take actions on those indicators. So the description section of the article contains information about the attack or the attacker profile. And then the public indicators section on the screen shows the previously published indicators related to that article. The links in the public indicators take one of the underlying Defender TI data or relevant external sources. So the Defender TI indicators section covers the indicators that Defender TI's research team has found and added to the articles. The vulnerability articles offers CVE ID searches to help users identify critical information about CVEs. So CVE ID searches result in vulnerability articles, and those articles provide context behind the CVEs depending on your search. And it includes a description of the CVE as well as a list of affected components, and that's tailored to tailored mitigation procedures and strategies in order to help prevent that from happening. It also contains references to deep and dark web chatter and other key observations. So vulnerability articles also include a Defender for TI priority score and a severity indicator. So the priority score is a unique algorithm that reflects the priority of the CVE based on the CVE scoring, the CVSS system, and looks for exploits, chatter, and linkage to malware, essentially. So the Defender TI priority score then evaluates the recency of these components so users can understand which CVEs should be remediated first. Microsoft also collects and analyzes and indexes internet data to assist users in detecting and responding to threats, prioritizing incidents, and proactively identifying the infrastructure of adversaries that are targeted organizations. So it's a really great tool, for sure. So the Microsoft 365 Defender portal, it's huge. It contains a ton of information, a ton of data, a ton of different products that all work together to provide you with effective ways to look for incidents within your organization. So the 365 Defender portal combines protection, detection, investigation, response to assets, devices, email collaboration, cloud apps, all in this central portal. And it provides a view to the security health of your organization and helps security admins and security operations teams manage and protect their organization. So the composition of the cards and data depends on the user role, essentially. Because the Defender 365 portal uses role-based access control, different roles will see different cards that are especially more meaningful to them in their day-to-day roles. So the 365 Defender portal allows admins to tailor the navigation pane to meet daily operational needs, and admins can customize what each card will show for each independent role. So some of the more top important things that you'll want to pay attention to in the portal is the homepage, which you get a glance view at the overall security health in the organization, the incidents and alerts, which will detect, as the Microsoft 365 Defender X product is in the process of looking at the different services and apps that are creating alerts across the organization. It'll call out and alert on malicious events or activities, and then grouping these into related alerts that form an incident. So an incident in Microsoft 365 Defender is essentially a collection of correlated alerts and associated data that make up a story of an attack. So selecting an incident name displays a summary, essentially, of what the incident is and provides access to tabs with additional information. Then you've got the hunting, where you can go and search proactively for suspicious files and activities. There's the threat intelligence aspect as well. Secure Score, Learning Hub, Microsoft 365 trials, so you can start trials if you haven't already done so of the different products that we've kind of outlined today. You can look at supported partner connections, so technology partners, professional services, as well as assets, so devices and identities, endpoints, reports, permissions, roles. This whole portal contains a lot of really interesting functionalities, and definitely something worth checking out, which we will do in this demo, where we're going to walk through the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. All right, so in this demo, we'll show you the Microsoft 365 Defender portal, and we'll be walking through the content displayed on the landing page, which you can see on the screen right now. We'll also be walking through options on the navigation panel that provide a quick access to functionality that's part of the Microsoft's extended detection and response framework and our solution. So it's the XDR solution that includes Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft Defender for Office 365, and lastly, you'll also see how Microsoft Secure Score can help an organization improve its security posture. So part one here is we're going to be exploring the Microsoft 365 Defender landing page. So to get to this portal, again, typing in security.microsoft.com, or you can go through the admin portal and then click this security link, and it'll take you through a new browser tab to the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. So the homepage of the Microsoft 365 Defender portal shows many of the common cards that security teams need. So the composition of the cards and data is dependent on the user role. So if I was a global administrator, which I am in this case, I'm going to see information from across all the different parts of the product. If I was a specific security admin or just an administrator from a Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Defender for Office 365 perspective, I might only see information covering the email and collaboration aspects of the portal. So the cards can be displayed and customized to our preference. So up here at the top, again, we can add additional cards as needed. So you can see that from a global administrator standpoint, I already pretty much have all of the cards added, but maybe I want to add the security news feed as well. So let's drop that over here on the left-hand side. And it didn't want me to drop it on the left-hand side, so let's put it on the right-hand side here. There we go. And so that'll fill in with additional newsfeed items that might be coming out from Microsoft Security. So this is great. As an admin, I might want to have my coffee in the morning and just start kind of browsing through what's going on from a Microsoft Security standpoint, or looking at ITDR health, or Defender for Identity information, or threat analytics, or things like that. There's a ton of different information that can be provided directly on the dashboard, and yeah, we can just close through that. So as we are looking at any of the different cards, we can additionally take action on individual ones and remove them if we don't need them. So let's say insider risk, I don't care about that, which is kind of crazy, but let's say in my case, I don't need to worry about insider risk because I'm focused on other things. So I got rid of that card, saved me some space, but I can also go and re-add it by just clicking add cards and then drag it back onto the screen if I need it. We can also move our cards around. So, earlier when I tried to add the security newsfeed, I wanted it on the left-hand side. I couldn't add it directly there. So now that I can move it, let's just pull it back over and drop it directly on the left-hand side. I kind of want to have my secure score at the very top. So let's pull that one up. And now I've got my security newsfeed and my secure score as I'd like to have them. So that lets us customize this and move things around as much as we'd like, and also get the information that is important to us right at the top, right at the forefront when we log into the portal directly. So the left navigation panel, this provides links to access information that's part of the Microsoft's Extended Detection and Response solution, so our XDR solution. And that includes incidents and alerts, hunting, our action center, threat analytics, secure score, and more. It also includes quick access to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which are links listed underneath of the endpoint section here. Defender for Office 365, which are all listed under email and collaboration. We can also see links for Defender for Cloud Apps, which we already spent a bit of time exploring. And we can also see some of the aspects from reporting and health and auditing that we might need to explore. So these options, we can definitely click through to them. We can always return home by just scrolling up on the left-hand side, clicking the home button. So let's say I wanted to go and investigate some of the assets that are deployed in the environment. That's great. Now I want to go back home and I'm good to go. Demo part 2. So in this part of the demo, we'll be talking about Microsoft Secure Score and how it can help an organization improve its security posture. So from the left-hand navigation side here on the Defender, Microsoft 365 Defender homepage, we can go ahead and select Secure Score. And again, we also had a Secure Score listed here on the homepage that we can click through to as well. In this case, let's go ahead and click on the left-hand button and pop open our Secure Score. So what's great about this tool is that it calls out specific action items and improvement items that we can take into consideration to help increase the overall security of our organization. So when we're on this overview page, what it shows us is pretty much a measurement of our organization's security posture. So our organization's secure score is shown as a percentage, and along with a number of points that we've achieved out of the total possible points and broken down by category. So what's great here is that we can see that. So from an identity standpoint, my test tenant's currently sitting at 77.57% of our points have been achieved, whereas our weakest link is the apps category. So talking about configuring Defender for Cloud Apps and some additional settings there. So we can, at a glance, see where our organization is weaker and where organization needs to be augmented and increased through recommended actions. On the right-hand side, we can also see comparisons. So what this does is it takes our amalgamated score and compares it to other organizations of a similar size that have their own tenancy and what their score looks like. So relatively, I can see that my organization, in this case, is doing a bit better than most organizations of the same size as mine, but I still have a gap of 37.82% points that I can go to get up to 100%, from a secure standpoint. Now, it's not always realizable to accomplish each one of these implementation actions or our recommended actions, but there are ways to work around the score impact. When we are looking at recommended actions from the top of the page, we can see a full breakdown of all the actions that we could take within our organization in order to increase the overall security according to the score impact here. Now, what's great about this is that it is filterable, and so we can focus on specified categories as they're broken down from a zero trust mindset. So we can take, let's say we want to focus on our weakest link, right, which I showed earlier on the overview page, is the Cloud Apps configuration. So we can click on the apps category here and filter it down to the apps so that we're focusing on anything that touches our applications and from the app standpoint. So here are the top recommendations with the top score impacts, and it's broken down and automatically filters down to the lowest score impact. So I can start with my top ones, click through the recommended action. I can see what the implementation status is. I can see who would be affected by the policy that is configured less securely, and then I can go and find out how to implement that process by following the next steps here and clicking through to technical documentation that'll help guide me through the process to get that configured. There are options here as well to edit the status. I can mark it as planned. I could also mark it as risk accepted, which will not give me the points, but it will just remove the improvement action from here and also mark it that it is something that's been done. So let's say I already have something that ensures intelligence and impersonation protection is enabled. So I have another product in my organization that meets that need. I can actually go and say, well, this has been resolved through a third-party product. This is fixed by product A or something like that. And so now I'm just removing that from the secure score ultimately because it's already being mitigated or it's being accomplished through a different product. So we can manipulate our recommended actions in that way. And Secure Score does take about 24 hours to update after a change has been implemented. So just something to keep in mind. So we can look at our history as well. So our history of changes as they've progressed through the organization, as the organization has been onboarded to Microsoft 365 Defender, as we've been making these changes, we can see how our improvement score has been augmented, and we can also see if it's dropped because of new configurations or elements that come out. So again, this is something that evolves regularly. The cloud is in constant flux, so keep an eye on the secure score. You might be at 100%, and then the next week you might be at 90, but it's because new functionalities have been released, new threats have come out, so we might need to mitigate those in different ways. We can also look at metrics and trends. So let's see how our organization is doing compared to others. We can see if we've regressed in certain ways, like when did we regress, why did we regress. We can get some interesting information from that front as well. So ultimately in this demo, what we've covered is exploring the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. We've walked through content that's displayed on the landing page. We've also explored the options on the navigation panel that provide quick access to functionality that's part of the XDR. And we've talked about Defender for Endpoints, Office 365, and where those show up in that list. And we showed you how Microsoft Secure Score can ultimately help you improve your organization's security posture. To wrap up session 4, let's take a quick look at the things that we've covered so far. So we described the function and identity types that are available in Microsoft Entra ID. We also described the access management capabilities of Microsoft Entra ID. We took a look at describing threat protection with the Microsoft 365 Defender, and we explored compliance management capabilities in Microsoft Purview. We also took some time to navigate the Microsoft Service Trust Portal and its privacy capabilities. So now we're just going to take a quick 10-minute break and see everyone back here when we get started on session 5. So see you soon. Welcome back from break, everybody. Let's get started on our 5th session, and this is our final session. So let's learn about how people and organizations can get the most out of their Microsoft 365 investments through varying pricing models, continuous support, and licensing options that were really designed to meet your needs. So let's get started with session 5. Now let's explore the Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal. So this portal is for organizations to manage their compliance needs. learn about Compliance Manager and Compliance Score, and which can help organizations manage and simplify and improve compliance across the organization. So after completing this learning objective, you'll be able to describe the Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal, describe Compliance Manager, and describe the use and benefits of Compliance Score. The Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal brings together all of the tools and data that are needed to help understand and manage an organization's compliance needs. So the Compliance Portal is available to customers with a Microsoft 365 SKU with one of the following roles. So you need a Global Administrator, Compliance Administrator, or a Compliance Data Administrator. There's also the Compliance Scorecard, and this card shows your overall compliance score and will forward admins to the Compliance Manager where they can see a breakdown of the compliance score and understand, where they measure and how they can improve and complete recommended performance actions or improvement actions with controls. So the score essentially helps an organization understand its current compliance posture, and it also helps an organization to prioritize actions based on their potential to reduce risk. There's also the new solution card, solution catalog card, which links to collections of integrated solutions that are used to manage end-to-end compliance scenarios across 3 compliance solution areas. So we've got the information protection and data lifecycle management section, and that shows us how to use Microsoft Purview compliance solutions to protect and govern data in the organization. And the insider risk management section on the homepage shows how your organization can identify and analyze and then act on internal risks before they cause harm. And the discover and respond section on the homepage shows how your organization can quickly find, investigate, and respond to compliance issues with relevant data. The active alerts card includes a summary of the most active alerts and a link where admins can view more detailed information such as alert severity, status category, and more. Let's dig into Compliance Score or Compliance Manager here. So Compliance Manager is a feature in the Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal that helps admins to manage an organization's compliance requirements with greater ease, essentially. So Compliance Manager can help your organization by assisting them throughout the journey by taking inventory of data protection risks, managing complexities of implementing controls, and then staying current with regulations and certifications. So this also helps you report to auditors. So you can keep an eye on this and then improve as you're going through it, and the score will continue to reflect on that. Compliance Manager helps simplify compliance and reduce risk by providing pre-built assessments based on common regional industry regulations. So you can just kind of pick and choose the template that you want to use and then see how your organization matches up. And it'll also suggest improvement actions in order for you to get compliant with that regulation. There's also workflow capabilities that enable admins to efficiently complete risk assessments for the organization. And then there's step-by-step improvement actions as part of the Compliance Manager that admins can take to help meet regulations and standard relevant to the organization. So some actions will be managed by Microsoft as well, and you'll be able to see that on the side. So what Microsoft has already done versus what is required for your organization to do. So the compliance score is ultimately a calculation that helps an organization understand its overall compliance posture by measuring how it's progressing with improvement actions. And controls. So a control is a requirement of a regulation, a standard, or a policy. So it defines how to assess and manage the system configuration, that organizational process, and the people responsible for meeting a specific requirement or regulation, standard, or policy. So if we're talking about regulation, standards, or policies, this is where you're going to be wanting to focus on that control aspect. So Compliance Manager tracks the following types of controls. We've got Microsoft Managed Controls. So those are controls for Microsoft Cloud Services, which Microsoft is responsible for implementing. Remember, this is a SaaS solution. So Microsoft has a lot of controls that they're responsible for implementing. However, there are also controls that are sometimes referred to as customer managed controls, and those are implemented and managed by the organization. So remember that shared service, shared responsibility model that we talked about in an earlier module. So shared controls are responsibility for implementing these controls are also shared by the organization and Microsoft. So when we're talking about shared controls, it's split. There might be a part that's Microsoft, another part that's your organization. So it's just keeping those in mind as well. So compliance score measures progress in completing recommended improvement actions within controls. And the score can help an organization to understand its current compliance posture. It also helps the organization to prioritize actions based on their potential reduced risk. So what's the difference between Compliance Manager and Compliance Score? Well, Compliance Manager is the end-to-end solution, and Purview Compliance Score is the calculation of the overall posture across the organization. So the compliance score is available through Compliance Manager. And then Compliance Manager gives the admins the capabilities to understand and increase their compliance score so that they can ultimately improve the organization's compliance posture and help it to stay in line with compliance requirements. And also, just as a side note, it's a really great tool to utilize to show the improvements that you've been doing, especially to those higher ups who are asking what you're doing to improve your overall organizational score. Well, here you go, a really nice dashboard to walk through it. So the overall compliance score is also calculated using scores that are assigned to actions, and actions come in a couple types. You've got your improvement actions, which are actions that the organization is expected to manage, and Microsoft actions, which are Microsoft managed actions for the organization. So the action types have points assigned to them, and those points count towards the entire, the total of the compliance score. So actions can also be considered technical or non-technical, and those also affect how the impact of the overall score is going to look like. So actions are also assigned a score value based on whether they're categorized as mandatory, discretionary, preventative, detective, or corrective. So a mandatory action would be something that can't be bypassed. For example, creating a policy to set requirements for password length or expiration. That's just necessary. We require you to do that. Discretionary, these actions depend on the user's understanding and adhering to a policy. For example, a policy where users are required to ensure their devices are unlocked before they leave them. So that's not something that we can enforce. However, it's something that is discretionary. So the following subcategories are actions that can be classified as mandatory or discretionary. So a preventative action is designed to handle specific risks like using encryption to protect data at rest in case of breaches or attack. Detective actions actively monitor systems to identify irregularities that could present risks or that can be used to detect breaches or intrusions. So examples of these types of actions are system access audits, regulatory compliance audits, things like that, and corrective actions. So these help admins to minimize the adverse effects of security incidents by undertaking corrective measures to reduce their immediate effect or possibly even reverse the damage. So something that you need to fix, essentially. And so actions that are mandatory and preventative with 27 points provide the highest points value toward your compliance score. So organizations accumulate points for every action completed, and the compliance score is shown as a percentage representing all the actions completed compared with the ones that are outstanding. So keep in mind, this is something that evolves. You can't just look at this once when you deploy your tenant and then walk away. Keep an eye on this. Keep referring back to it. See if there's new actions that need to be taken. See if Microsoft's performed new actions in order to become compliant with a specific regulation. These are all things to keep in mind. So let's dive into the compliance portal. So we'll take a look at Purview Compliance. All right, in this demo, we'll show the Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal homepage and ways in which the capabilities of Compliance Manager can help organizations improve their compliance posture. So part one of this demo will be walking through the compliance portal homepage and how to customize the card view in the navigation panel. In order to get to the Purview homepage, we can go to admin.microsoft.com and then click on Compliance from the left-hand nav page. This will lead us to the Purview portal. Another way is simply typing in compliance.microsoft.com, and that will take us to the same location. So when we first log in the very first time, we'll be presented with a welcome message that can help us guide through, specific next steps in configuring the portal. It'll also tell us how to, provide feedback on the portal. Once we click through that, it'll disappear, and now we've got our dashboard view where we can start customizing our cards like we can do on the admin portal as well as the security portal. So here, we can click on cards and we can add additional cards. We can already see that I've already added all the cards that are available as I am a global administrator for the account, but we can customize, remove cards, go and add ones that we do want to see. If I want to bring that back, then again, we can bring it back and add it as necessary. So there are ways to manipulate that and then changing the order in which the cards are appearing. If I want to move active alerts over here and, let's say we bring insider management or insider risk management up top, we can do that and just manipulate things and move them around as necessary. And it doesn't want to go there because this is a split tab. There we go. So moving things around as we would like. So the cards section of the homepage just gives us an at-a-glance kind of view as to what is available in our organization, what our compliance posture is, and the different solutions that are there. So from this window, we can scroll through and see the different solutions, but one of the ones that I want to call out is definitely the Compliance Manager score, and that gives us a decent understanding of the compliance score that our organization is currently sitting under. As we're looking at every card, again, I was showing that earlier, we can click on the ellipsis and then remove any cards that we do not need. We can also add them as shown previously through there. So it effectively allows us to customize our navigation and our view from that standpoint. Now on the left-hand navigation side, we've got our primary view, which covers, roles and scopes. We've got different trial options that are available here. We've also got data classification, data connectors, alerts, policies, roles and scopes, and things that are calling out. So kind of a generic overall segmentation. And then on the left-hand side as well, we do have solutions that are shown here. And so these are specific products that are part of the Purview family that we can dive into and do additional configurations on. So for example, if I wanted to create a data loss prevention policy, I can navigate into the primary view of data loss prevention, create policies, alerts, endpoint DLP settings, and Activity Explorer from a DLP standpoint. If I was an e-discovery manager or administrator, then the e-discovery portal might be of more interest to me. And these are all customizable and visible through the various access and roles and scopes that you can define to allow users to have specific access to different applications. So again, you can customize this navigation pane by adding your specific segments, and we can look at customizing the navigation here by adding or removing additional items as they're appearing in the list. So that can be customized according to your role as well as according to your own taste and how you want to manage the portal. Another option here that is really interesting is the Compliance Manager point of view. And so from the left-hand navigation panel of the Purview Compliance Portal, we can see a Compliance Manager up here at the top. So let's go ahead and click on that. Now at the top of the Compliance Manager page, we can see that by default, it loads up our overview. So our overview segment just shows us actions that can improve the overall compliance score. It shows us the improvement actions, the solutions that affect our score, and our overall score as well, and how many points of a maximum of how many points have been achieved by us, and any other additional information that is broken down by specific subjects and categorizations. Again, this is another score that is filterable. So if we want to dig into very specific information, we can look at applying specific regulations to the score and seeing where we have improvement actions that target a specific regulation. We can also target the data protection baseline, which is Microsoft's baseline that's built off of parts of GDPR as well as Microsoft's own approach and some other regulations. So we can apply that and look at where we fit from a baseline standpoint. But if we want to filter by solution or action types, then we can definitely do that as well. What's fun about solutioning by filtering on solution is that you can see the actions that will affect that specific solution and then kind of do that cross collaboration between the solution and compliance manager in order to overall increase your secure score or your compliance score, sorry. So as we dig into individual actions, we can look at this sort of breadcrumb approach to how we can improve our overall compliance score. So we can actually click on View All Improvement Actions, or from the top here, click on Improvement Actions. So from the top of the page as well, there are a bunch of different tabs to Compliance Manager. We can see Overview, Improvement Actions, there's Solutions and Assessments, Regulations, Alerts, and Alert Policies. So let's go ahead and look at Solutions. But just before that, I did want to touch on the improvement actions. So as we're looking through here, similar concept to Secure Score, we're looking at information. We can click through every single one that will help us understand more precisely how our organization is hitting that score or not hitting the score, and what we can do to overall go ahead and improve that. So we get details on how to use Microsoft solutions to implement, what is affecting the compliance manager score that it's getting. We can assign the task to specific individuals. We can track how it's being implemented. We can look for evidence, prove that it's been implemented properly, and also see what related controls this applies to according to the regulations that we've applied to our organization. So hopping back to Compliance Manager view now, and I was doing that from the top of the screen there, let's hop into Solutions. And so from Solutions, we can see how solutions can contribute to our score, as well as any remaining opportunity for individual solutions here. So I can see from attack simulation training, that's something that's available in my organization, as this template or this tenant does have an E5 license. So I can see that attack simulation training has 0 of 9 points, but I could go and increase my overall compliance score by 9 points if I go into the configurations that are attached to this solution. Also from the top of the page here is assessments. So on this page, we'll see data protection baseline for Microsoft 365, as well as any other assessments that I might have run that were pulled into the tenant for a different reason. So in this case, I tried running Canada PIPEDA. Let's go ahead and click on data protection baseline. So again, this baseline assessment has a set of controls for key regulations and standards for data protection and general data regulation and governance. So Compliance Manager becomes more helpful as you add your own assessments and things that you're required to meet from a compliance or an organizational standard need, essentially. So as we're building through this, you can break down the different controls that are being applied. We can see our improvement actions. And what's really great about these assessments too is that we can see what actions Microsoft has performed that achieve the points as required by the regulation. And so this will adapt to the different assessments that we want to apply. So I digged into the data protection baseline. Let's say we look at the Canada PIPEDA assessment that was run against the current configuration of this tenant. We can see that I only hit 32%, and that 32% is coming from Microsoft because Microsoft has already achieved pretty much all the points in the configuration. Though again, some of these configuration points might be shared responsibility, where Microsoft does a part of the configuration, but I have to go as the admin and finalize that configuration myself afterwards. From the top here, we can also click on regulations. So the regulations portion lists out regulations that are available to the organization, and we can also create our own assessments from available templates. You can also use premium templates. So the premium templates are available here, and you can import them. There are additional costs associated with premium templates at some point, but you can create other default templates as included. So it's just to be aware of the availability of premium templates within your license SKU. So definitely reach out to your account team and get information on that as you're walking through those. Also from the top of the page here, we can see alerts that are available. Alerts that we want to configure, or compliance alerts that have been triggered. So we can assign this specific alert to a user and then action on it. So these are alerts that have been configured through other policies or other configurations that are showing up here. And these are alerts that were triggered for specific reasons, such as in this case, the compliance score changed. So likely there were additions added to compliance score that impacted negatively or regressed my score because of upgraded solutions or changes to regulation or things like that. So it's good to have that kind of alerting going on. So that means that I can go in and then investigate what changed and why, and then apply the fixes as necessary. Also from here, we do have the alert policy configuration. So I can add additional alert policies and then configure the conditions as required. Who do I want to contact if something changes, and things like that. So to return back to the home page to look at my cards, just click the home button up at the top left nav, and we are good to go. So in this demo, we talked about Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal, the homepage, as well as some capabilities of Compliance Manager, and how that can help organizations improve their overall compliance posture. So quick tip, definitely use Compliance Manager and definitely filter based on the solution that you're looking to implement, and look at the improvement actions and perform those improvement actions. So good luck on your deployment. Microsoft runs on trust. So here you'll explore the Service Trust Portal for content on how Microsoft delivers on our commitment to trust. You'll also learn about Microsoft Priva, a solution to help meet privacy goals. And after completing this learning objective, you'll be able to describe the offerings of the Service Trust Portal, as well as describe Microsoft privacy principles and describe Microsoft Priva. Let's take a look. The Service Trust Portal, or STP, is Microsoft's public site for publishing audit reports and other compliance-related information associated with Microsoft's cloud services. The STP users can download audit reports produced by external auditors and gain insights from Microsoft-authored white papers. And these provide additional details on how Microsoft Cloud Services protect your data and how you can manage cloud data security and compliance for your organization. So accessing the Service Trust Portal is pretty simple. To access some of these resources in the Service Trust Portal, you must log in as an authenticated user with your Microsoft Cloud Services account. So you can use your Entra ID organizational account and review and accept the Microsoft non-disclosure agreement for compliance materials. So when you log into the Service Trust Portal, when you hit that landing page, it includes content that's organized into the following categories. You've got certifications, regulations, and standards. So that's security implementation and design information, with the goal of making it easier for you to meet regulatory compliance objectives by understanding how Microsoft Cloud Services keep your data secure. There's also the reports, white papers, and artifacts. And this section includes general documents relating to the following categories: BCP and DR, so business continuity and disaster recovery, penetration test and security assessments, so attestation of pen tests and security assessments conducted by third parties, privacy and data protection, so privacy and data protection resources, as well as facts and white papers, where white papers answer those frequently asked questions. There's also the industry and regional resources, and this section includes documents that apply to the following industries and regions. Financial services, so resources elaborating regulatory compliance by guidance for FSI, and that's by country and region. There's also the healthcare and life sciences, so capabilities offered by Microsoft for the healthcare industry. There's media entertainment, so media entertainment industry resources. United States government resources exclusively for U.S. government customers, regional resources, so documents describing compliance with Microsoft's online services with various regional policies and regulations, and resources for your organization. And this section lists documents that apply to your organization restricted by tenant, and so that's based on your organization's subscription and its own permissions. So let's take a look at what the STP looks like and jump right in. All right, in this demo, we'll show the features and content available from the Service Trust portal, and also included is navigating the Trust Center to view information about privacy at Microsoft. So in this part, let's just take a look at what the Service Trust portal is, how we can access the reports, and how we can save those reports to our library. So let's open up a web browser, which I already have up on the screen, and we will go to aka.ms/STP for Service Trust Portal. So this will bring us to the landing page for the Service Trust Portal, and the STP contains details about Microsoft's implementation of controls and processes that protect our cloud services and customer data. So to access some of the resources in the STP, we first have to sign in with an authenticated user using our Microsoft Cloud Services account, so the one that's tied to our tenant. So in this case, I'm already logged into Microsoft Edge browser with Megan Bowen. So let's just click sign in, and technically it should auto log me in. Okay, no, I do have to go and select my account here, so let's go ahead and do that. And as she's already logged in, I don't have to go and re-enter my password, but now I'm logged into the Service Trust portal. So as we're looking at the Service Trust portal when we first get here, this is kind of just the default view. If we scroll down here, we can see, different categorizations. We can see certifications, regulations, standards, reports, white papers, and artifacts, as well as industry and regional resources, resources for our organization, and compliance program around the Microsoft Cloud. So we can see a bunch of different information around the different categorization that's available here. We can also, if we scroll back to the top, we can see the different informations and breakdown of the different regulations and standards that are shown here. So if we click through to one, let's go look at ISO IEC. We can see all the documents that are tied to this specific regulation, as well as a description of what that regulation is, or what that standard is, and how the applicable documents tie to it in the different areas. So let's say I've read through this specific ISO test base for Microsoft 365. I can click on the ellipsis here, and I can actually download that document if I want to, or I can save it to my library. So when I save it to my library, it'll mention if it's part of a series of documents, and it will subscribe me to the series so that I'll be notified if there's changes to the series or changes to the documents. So if I want to proceed, I'll say yes. Do I want to receive email notifications? I can decide whether or not I do. For now, sure, why not? How often do I want to be daily notified? Well, let's just say on a monthly basis, because maybe they don't change too often, or if they do, I only care about that on a monthly basis. So now if I want to go and see information that's been added to my library, up at the top here, I do have the home page for the Service Trust portal. So that'll take me back home. I also had the option to click on My Library. And from the My Library view here, I can go and see any of the documents that I have signed up to receive. So here I can go and click through it and then download that document and investigate and read through the content as I feel like. So I could also download it as a PDF file, but I could also view previous versions of the document and scan back for historical views of that same document. So here I can download it, and then it'll launch the download for that document. And after agreeing with the non-disclosure agreement, of course, I can then go and read through that document as required. So if I head back to Service Trust Portal now, one of the other advantages about the Service Trust portal is that it does tie things to industry and regional resources. So depending on where my region is, what kind of industry I'm in, it will suggest specific information to the industry that I want to investigate in particular. So let's say that my tenant, Contoso, is a bank. So I'm really curious about financial service information and resources that tie to that. So then I can click through and see different information tied to that specific subject. If I head back though, there is an option for resources for my organization. And so what it does is it looks at organizational documents based on my subscription as well as the permissions that are tied to my organization. And it will go and pull together information that should be of high interest to me as my organization is managed. So, FedRAMP, things like that. I can then click through and it'll pull together all that documentation that I might need. So definitely a way to look through information as required. So let's say I click on this one instead. Yeah, so clearly, there's some part of the subscription doesn't allow me to have access to that for some reason. So I've picked some wrong examples, as is wont with a demo. It does not always go to plan. Yeah, so anyways, typically you would see any documents that were based on your organization's requirements. So we'd be able to click through and then see documents related to that. However, it is still possible to go and search for individual documents based on industry need or based on specific certifications, regulations, and standards. So that covers our review of the Service Trust Portal, how to use the My Library feature to save documents for future review. And additionally, we could also check out the Trust Center. Also from the Service Trust Portal, now that we're back on the home page here, we can also go and look at reports, white papers, and artifacts. So if we wanted to go grab some, business continuity, disaster recovery reports, or pen test and security assessment information, then we can click through here and it'll take us to the Service Trust Portal segment that covers the specific categorization that we were selecting earlier. We can also open up specific links to the Trust Center, which will take us to a different location depending on the type of report that we pick. So let's say we take the privacy and data protection view. So now looking at the data protection view here, we've got different applicable documents that are available for review. Let's say I click through to one of these. And again, I can go and download it and view all the different versions. There's also a portal called the Trust Center. If I go back to here and I click Learn More, so after having selected the different reports, if I click Learn More here, this will actually take me to the Trust Center, which is a portal that helps define more information around privacy and a bunch of different information about where the data is located, how securing your data, how we do all these types of things with your data, and different types of privacy laws that this data applies to. So another place that you can investigate, and again, the two are tightly linked together, so you can see how they are related at that level. So again, in this demo, we explored some of the options available under the Service Trust Portal, how to use the My Library feature in order to save documents, and we also visited the Trust Center very rapidly so that we can access and review information about privacy at Microsoft. Microsoft's approach to privacy is built on the following 6 principles. Control, putting you, the customer, in control of your data and your privacy with easy to use tools and clear choices. So your data is your business and you can access, modify, delete it at any time. Microsoft will not use your data without your agreement. And when we have your agreement, we use your data to provide only the services that you've chosen. Transparency, we only process your data based on the agreement in accordance with the strict policies and procedures that we've contractually agreed to. So when we deploy subcontractors or sub-processors to perform work that requires access to your data, they can only perform the functions that Microsoft has hired them to provide. And they're bound by the same contractual privacy commitments that Microsoft makes to you. Security. So with state-of-the-art encryption, Microsoft protects your data both at rest and in transit. All Microsoft managed encryption keys are properly secured and offer the use of technologies such as Azure Key Vault to help you control access to passwords and encryption keys and other secrets. Strong legal protections. So respecting local privacy laws and fighting for legal protection of privacy as a fundamental human right, Microsoft defends your data through clearly defined and well-established response policies and processes. So those are strong contractual commitments and, if necessary, the courts. We will not disclose data to a government or a law enforcement agency except as you direct or are required by law. If Microsoft receives a request for your data, we'll promptly notify you and provide a copy of the requested unless legally prohibited from doing so. We'll challenge every government request for commercial and public sector customer data where we can lawfully do so. No content-based targeting. Not using email, chat, files, or other personal content to target advertising. We do not share your data with advertiser-supported services, nor do we mine it for any purposes like marketing research or advertising. Benefits to you. When Microsoft does collect data, it's used to benefit you, the customer, and to make your experience better. For example, troubleshooting. Troubleshooting for prevention, detecting, and repairing problems affecting operations of services. Feature improvement. So ongoing improvement of features, including increasing reliability, protection of services and data, and personalized customer experience. So data is used to provide personalized improvements and better customer experience. Privacy is top of mind for organizations and consumers today, and concerns about how private data is handled are steadily increasing. Regulations and laws impact people around the world, so setting rules for how organizations store personal data and giving people the rights to manage personal data collected by an organization are crucial. So to meet regulatory requirements and build customer trust, organizations need to take privacy by default, take that stance of privacy by default, rather than manual processes and patchwork of tools and organizations and how they've previously handled it. We need a comprehensive solution to address common challenges such as helping employees adopt sound data handling practices and training them to spot and fix issues, understanding the potential risk in the amount of data, the amount and type of personal data that they've stored and shared, and fulfilling data subject requests or subject rights requests efficiently and on time. Microsoft Priva helps you meet these challenges so you can achieve your privacy goals. Priva's capabilities are available through two solutions. There's Priva Privacy Risk Management, which provides visibility into your organization's data and policy templates for reducing risks, and Priva Subject Rights Requests, which provides automation and workflow tools fulfilling data requests. Priva Privacy Risk Management. So this helps you understand the data your organization stores by automating discovery of personal data assets and providing visualizations for essential information. So these visualizations can be found on the overview and data profile pages, and the overview dashboard provides an overall view into your organization's data in Microsoft 365. So privacy administrators can monitor these trends and activities and identify and investigate potential risks involving personal data. So this springboards into key activities like policy management or subject right requests. So the data profile page in Priva provides a snapshot view of the personal data that your organization stores. And in Microsoft 365 and where it lives, you can also get that insight into the types of data that you're storing. So essentially it evaluates your organization's data stored in the following 365 services: Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft Teams. So privacy risk management in Microsoft Priva gives you the ability or the capability to set up policies that identify privacy risks in your 365 environment and enable easy remediation. So privacy risk management policies are meant to be internal guides and can help you detect overexposed personal data so that users can secure it. spot and limit transfers of personal data across departments or regional borders, and help users identify and reduce the amount of unused personal data that you store. So previous subject rights requests are pretty much just in accordance with privacy regulations around the world. Individuals or data subjects may make requests to review and manage the personal data about themselves that companies have collected. These requests are sometimes also referred to as data subject requests, DSRs, and data subject access requests, or DSARs, or even consumer rights requests. So for companies that store large amounts of information, finding the relevant data can be kind of a formidable task. And Microsoft Priva can help you handle these inquiries through subject rights request solution. So it provides workflow automation and collaboration capabilities for you to search out for this subject data, review your findings, and then collect appropriate files and produce reports. All right, well, let's get started with a session learning about Microsoft 365 pricing, licensing, and support. What we'll be focusing on is learning how people and organizations can get the most out of their Microsoft 365 investments through the different pricing models, continuous support, and licensing options that are designed to meet their needs. So after completing this learning objective, you'll be able to describe pricing models available for Microsoft 365 Microsoft Cloud Services, describe billing management features such as billing frequency and methods of payment, and describe the differences between base licensing and add-on licensing. All right, so you can find a suitable CSP at I'm looking for a solution provider. There's also the opportunity to learn more about benefits of Microsoft Enterprise Agreement at the Enterprise Agreement link below. You can also learn more information about trying out the free trial subscriptions at Try or Buy Microsoft 365 for Business subscription, and those are the links that you'll find below. Microsoft 365 billing is managed from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And the Admin Center allows you to manage subscriptions, view billing statements, update payment methods, and change your billing frequency and more. So there's a lot of different options that are around there. So consumption-based pricing charges, so paying only for what you use, and fixed pricing. So there's a bunch of different options that we'll be able to explore a bit later. So the pricing associated with your account depends on the subscription and the number of licensed users. So each service has a specific price that's typically rated on a per user or per month basis. One thing to note though is that the plans, the exact set of features, the pricing and licensing requirements can vary between countries and regions. So if you require a Microsoft 365 subscription in a non-US organization, contact your regional sales representative to learn what subscriptions, plans, features, and pricing are available. A license or a base license allows users to use the features and services included in the subscription plan. So when you buy a subscription, you specify the number of licenses that you need based on the number of people you have in your organization. So after you buy a subscription, you create the accounts for the people in your organization, and then you assign a license to each person. So as your organizational needs change, you can buy more licenses to accommodate new people, or reassign licenses to other users when someone leaves your organization. So Microsoft 365 products and services are available as user subscription licenses, or USLs, and are licensed on a per user basis. So each user accessing Microsoft 365 products and services is required to be assigned a USL. Administrators manage licenses from the Admin Center, and they can assign licenses to individual users or guest accounts. So now let's take a look at the billing and management aspects within the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So we're going to dive into this demo right now. In this demo, we'll be looking at showing how user and billing management features in Microsoft 365 Admin Center work. We'll also walk through how to add user licenses, talk about payment methods, and we'll also show options around the navigation panel to help manage users and billing. So to get started, let's hop into our browser here and go to admin.microsoft.com. And we'll sign in with our admin credentials. And as you can see, I'd already been open with Megan Bowen's account, so we're good to go on that front. Now on the left-hand nav panel, we can see additional options here. So let's go ahead and open up our active users. We can see our users by display name. So if I click on Adele, I can go and dig in and see which user and license she has assigned to her. On this view as well, there is ways to add additional columns. So I can add additional columns here, and I can see if I want to add a specific usage location, maybe first name, last name, department, a bunch of different information can be added here. So in this case, I'm currently viewing it by display name and username, and that's fine. Alternatively, when we are looking at the simplified view, we're seeing the same sort of column view here, and we can see a breakdown, but it's a little bit more limited on what's visible, so we can see the licenses as well as the username and that user sign-in. So from here, if we want to go and look at the different licenses, again, it's just clicking through to the user. That opens up a user blade, and then we can see what licenses are currently assigned to that user. So right here, we can see the different licenses that we currently have available. We can also go and look at requests. So any requests that are made from members of the organization to get additional licensing, and auto claim policies and things like that. But here, primarily, we're going to see, our breakdown of licenses. So we can click on a license and see, which users have that license assigned, and kind of see a bit more information at that level. Another option is going to your products, and we can also see the different products that are included, what those products are, and what benefits are included with those products, which at the moment is not something that we're going to see on this tenant. The marketplace is another great option here if you're looking to try out different aspects of different products within Microsoft 365. So let's say I wanted to just go and grab an in-product trial, say Defender for Endpoint. So I've got some options here to kick off a Defender for Endpoint P1 trial or P2 trial. And there's a bunch of different options here where we can go into the details and then explore the options around kicking off that trial, or even just going through here to purchase additional licenses. Now, if we look at our billing accounts, here we can see different accounts that are available from a billing perspective. So we can see Contoso is one of our billing accounts. We've got information around what the account is, and any agreement information that's tied to that account, as well as any aspects that are required to edit if we needed to update things or add additional information. From a bill and payments standpoint, we can see any invoices that are upcoming or outstanding. We can also add our payment methods through here. So any payment methods that are required to be added in order to submit proper payments, and major credit cards are accepted. So we can walk through that setting and add ourselves a credit card that would be tied to a license renewal. From a billing notification standpoint, going through here, we can look at whether or not we want to invoice a PDF or invoice as a PDF, so that we add that as a PDF directly to our email. Who's the contact information that's going to be receiving that bill, and any additional information that needs to be added. Do we need to add billing admins or global admins, or assign specific roles to a different account so that they receive admin purchases? So again, under the marketplace, we can go and add additional licenses as needed, or trials as we feel is necessary, and also explore just different aspects that are recommended. So, suggestions around how we can improve our tenant, and also explore, products that are available within the Microsoft 365 tenancy. So ultimately in this demo, we just reviewed user billing management features and Microsoft 365, the Admin Center, and learned how to manipulate our users licensing and how those have been assigned, as well as add payment methods and explore other options from a navigational perspective. So next up, what we're going to look at is creating a service request. So in this portion of the demo, we're going to create a service request, a support request from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And this is just in case, help is needed with Microsoft 365. So we can also see where we can view our existing support requests as well. So on the left-hand nav here, we're going to say show all and expand the navigation to its entirety. And underneath billing, we have the option here for support. So let's click on support and let's look at help and support. And here what we get presented with is a wizard that we can talk to. So let's say I'm having some issues with, let's see, what am I having issues with? Exchange, mailbox, not migrating. There we go. So it will propose some interesting alternative ways to help identify the issue that I'm facing. So I could look at, how to set up Exchange Online or migrate Mailbox to Exchange Online. And it will suggest some, insights or feedback around different aspects that are being configured actively. So I can look at, if there's additional help available on different links, where, what could tie directly to that migration aspect. And if I still absolutely need help, then I've got the option up here to click the headset icon. I can chat with a live support agent. I could also phone for, critical service requests in case something is not working at all, or we could send an email to place that service request. There's also additional information here that we'll provide, such as their time zone and if we speak a different language than English. From here as well, we can view historic service requests that had been previously placed, and there's a way to see that from the View Service Requests under the support icon here as well. So this shows us our historical service requests as well as any ongoing service requests that are required. After filling out the information in a service request, so let's head back there. We'll click on our contact support. I could say phone. Now we fill out some title information, a description of the problem. We provide our phone number and provide some additional consent as needed. We can also add additional accessibility related concerns in case we do have any. Let's say I didn't want to go with a phone request, so let's go back here and say email request. Again, it'll add additional consent options and who is the authorized contact. So as we're filling out the information, it will grab the content that I had provided as the title of the issue, and then I can provide additional content here. Remember to provide concise and clear descriptions of the issue that you're facing, and that'll help resolve the issue faster. So in this portion of the demo, we walked through how to create and view support requests in Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And now you know how to contact support if you're having an issue in Microsoft 365, and how to view the status of those existing support requests if you need to. It's vital that organizations know that the products and services they're using are reliable and secure. And Microsoft 365 Services guarantees levels of service for your organization. And levels of service are detailed in a legal agreement referred to as a service level agreement. The SLA describes Microsoft's commitment for uptime connectivity for Microsoft Online Services. And you can view and download the current and archived editions of the SLAs for online services at the following link. It's crucial for an organization to also know the health status of Microsoft 365 services. Your organization's administrators can use the Microsoft 365 Admin Center to view the current health status of each of your Microsoft 365 services and tenants. They can also view the history of services that have been affected in the last 30 days and information about current outages and disruptions to services. It's useful to view the health to find out whether you're dealing with a known issue that has already been solutioned or there's a solution already being in progress. So that way you don't spend too much time troubleshooting or, if you should contact support. So always double check the health status before opening a support ticket. Always double check the health status as the very first step in your troubleshooting process. Take advantage of the different ways you can share your thoughts as well. So Microsoft is always looking for feedback on our products and services from you and from people around the world. So to learn more about providing feedback, please visit the following link and definitely provide us with that information. It's super valuable. We love to hear your feedback and we want to know how to make our products better. So this concludes our Microsoft 365 virtual training day, where we talked about Microsoft 365 fundamentals. So let's recap all of the content that you've seen so far. And I know it's been like drinking from the fire hose, but bear with me. Let's just touch on all the points individually, and then we'll wrap this all up with a nice clean ribbon. So Microsoft 365 is a cloud service. So we touched on that. We talked about how it can help you work and live better with these Office apps, as well as the different smart cloud features that are available. We talked about the productivity and collaboration solutions in Microsoft 365, things like OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. We also looked at the concept and benefits of cloud computing. So benefits such as accessing your data and services from anywhere, and then the possibility of scaling and cost savings around that scaling and reliability, as well as the security all up of these cloud services. Then we also talked about the different types of cloud services, such as SaaS, PaaS, IaaS. At this point, I really hope you're able to understand which each of those means, because that's a really crucial part of this course. So remember, software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. We also talked about endpoint modernization, where we discussed management options and deployment options in Microsoft 365, things such as Windows 10, Windows 11, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and Autopilot. We talked about analytic capabilities as well, and that's something that's really great. The telemetry that we can see and find within our Microsoft 365 tenant, things like Power BI, My Analytics, and Workspace Analytics are just phenomenal. Microsoft Entra ID, we spent a lot of time focused on the cloud-based identity and access management service. And that's what helps secure our organization and enable user productivity with different identity types and access management features. We also looked at Microsoft 365 Defender, which is a unified enterprise defense suite that helps you protect your organization from advanced threats across endpoints, identities, email, and applications. Then we talked about Microsoft Purview, where we dived into the compliance world and explored things around data governance and how to discover, catalog, map, and control data across our on-premise and cloud and hybrid networks. We talked about Microsoft Service Trust Portal and the privacy capabilities, as well as help you understand how to comply with various regulations and standards using something like Compliance Manager. We touched on the pricing and billing models available for cloud services, such as pay-as-you-go, reserved instances, things like that, hybrid benefits. We talked about licensing options as well, available for M365, how base licensing works, add-on licensing, things like that. We touched on the different support offerings that are available and how to create support requests through the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. We took a look at the different service level agreements and concepts on how to find SLAs for different cloud services. And we talked about tracking service health through the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and how to subscribe to service health notifications so that we can actually get those in real time. We also talked about how to provide feedback to Microsoft 365 and that we're always looking for feedback from our customers. So keep in mind, take advantage of that feedback button and use it. We really want that feedback. So that summarizes essentially what we covered today and yesterday on this course. I'd like to thank you for attending, and we hope you really enjoyed these sessions. I know I did. I had a really great time doing this. Remember, there are many ways to continue your learning journey, such as MS Learn, where we offer a ton of self-paced learning options, and be sure to check out calendar events for more Microsoft Virtual Training Days. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.